What's up? Andrew Andres
There we go.
coming
That's
at your
it.
ears.
That's all we need. We've got two of the best, well, the only best first name out there.
I mean, honestly, the first five letters are gold.
Yeah.
Let's just stop right there.
And then the last are just heritage.
They're just decoration.
Decoration.
It's just like a tattoo, It's just like, oh, this tells us a little bit about us. Yeah.
Love it.
My parents speak Spanish, yours do not.
No,
That's
but my
basically.
grandparents speak Norwegian, so it makes sense.
Are you Norwegian? You're like Norwegian
Norwegian.
descent? Oh,
Yeah,
my wife's
absolutely.
Norwegian. That's
Oh,
sweet.
phenomenal.
You
Yeah.
guys have some like the population isn't big, but your ability to produce talented humans is incredible.
It's unmatched. It's
It
unmatched.
really, it kind of is. You got Holland. He's like a goal scoring machine right now for Manchester
hmm
City, and he's like
hmm
breaking all sorts of records, and he's super young. And then Magnus Carlsen, which I think you might you do you know who that is?
Absolutely. Yeah. Who doesn't know who Magnus
The
Carlsen is?
goat. Wait, do you actually know who that is?
Is he the strong man?
No, oh no, but you also got that guy.
Yes, we got that guy. Okay, Magnus, come on, help me.
Magnus is he's the probably I think at this point is you can argue pretty strongly that he's the greatest chess player of all time.
Ah, sure. Great.
He's a freak.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan. But that's a whole different conversation. That's a story for Bizzler. But I'm a big fan. But welcome to the show, Andrew. So just so you guys know, let me tell the people listening who we got here in the house today. Welcome everybody to the show. If this is your first episode, where you been? We interview people who sold books door to door with a Southwestern Advantage. It's a company out of Nashville, Tennessee that's been doing it since like 1868. But today with me, I have Andrew Hovelson. Hey man, thank you for letting me know that I was spelling or pronouncing your name right, by the way.
That was the most incredible for your listeners. Everyone mispronounces Hovelson. A lot of times there's D's and as in dogs that Huddleston,
Oh,
Hovelson, Hovelson. And I'm like, literally, you can look at the spelling. None of those letters are in there.
yeah.
And you just straight up
Hovelson.
absolutely like a hot knife through butter. We're like, is it Hovelson? And my jaw dropped.
Yeah, that was awesome. So I appreciate you letting me know. I mean, my wife's maiden name was Halverson. So
Are you serious?
yeah,
Come on now. Okay. Can we get into it and then you can introduce me?
sure.
So my great grandfather on my mom or on my dad's side, they emigrated right from Norway, and his name was Hovelson, so it would have been pronounced Hovelson. And he was so tired of everyone being confused in northern Minnesota about that he changed our last name to Hovelson.
There you go.
That's it.
Oh my God, that's wild. And my father-in-law was telling me that it was his dad that came too. And when he got through Ellis Island, they were like, what is it? And he's like, Halver. So they just put like Halverson,
Yeah,
and that's how she ended up Halverson, which is really curious how that
absolutely.
all that happens. But hell yeah. So Hovelson, welcome to the show. And you are currently in New York City, which is in the city of New York, in case you guys didn't know. For 2 summers, you sold books door to door for 80 hours a week on straight commission during your college summers. That's awesome. You were part of the JYD organization. Andrew sold from 2003 and 2004, which were really golden years for Southwestern, if we're being honest. He went to the University of Minnesota in Twin Cities, originally from Lewiston, Minnesota, which is, I want to hear more about that. Sounds cold. Currently, Andrew is spearheading the Southwestern student coaching and is a professional actor. Excited to talk about that as well. His favorite scroll is number 2. I will greet this day with love in my heart. And if you sold books, you know what we're talking about. Now, Andrew comes from a unique background in art and business. He graduated from the Guthrie Theater Actor Training Program, magna cum laude, which, holy shit, let's check out the big brain on Andrew. And you have a Bachelor in Fine Arts in Acting. He also holds a Master of Fine Arts in Acting from New York University Tisch School of the Arts. It's a prestigious graduate acting program, which accepts 1% of the applicants. Whoa. I'm excited to talk about all this, man. You're kicking ass. Okay. And finally, Andrew has a passion for students and education and entrepreneurship, and he is on a mission to deepen the human experience through art, storytelling, and mentorship. He currently lives with his wife and 3 young sons in an 800 square foot, 1 bedroom, I guess now 2 bedroom
Yeah, now
apartment.
it's 2 bedroom and it's a whopping 1,000 square foot.
Get out.
Get
Wow.
moving on up to the east
And you're in
side.
Hell's Kitchen where Daredevil lives.
Yep.
And you have named your apartment the Testosterone Factory. That makes sense. I grew up with 2 brothers. I'm the oldest of 3, so my poor mother.
We have triple bunk beds in our apartment. It's amazing.
Oh, it fits. There's a
It's amazing. It's literally one of my wife and I's crowning achievements in life is that the boys love it. It's like naval barracks, and it's their room, man.
so
And they're
much room
only
for
gonna-
activities.
Yeah, it's amazing. That was a great intro.
You think so? I think. I mean, I was just reading.
I wonder who wrote it.
I actually had all of that memorized. I did not just read it for the first time about 5 minutes ago.
I love it.
For people who are listening who are new and are who but did sell books, we do no pre-approach here, so we are highlighting the connection you can have with someone just because you have shared trauma. So speaking of which, let's jump into this thing. Also shout out as before we get started, shout out to our friends over at Enlight Energy. If you guys are looking for something to do to earn some cash, especially if you are in a variety of states, predominantly Florida, let us know. Get you a job over with the folks over at Enlight. All right, my man Andrew. Let me ask you first of all, what the heck are you up to now? What are you doing? Tell me more about this mentorship, this passion of yours, working with the youth and what you're up to. I know we shared a little bit on the phone, but I didn't get too many details. So let's jump in there.
Oh, good. Yeah, absolutely. So I help spearhead. I'm a team lead over here at Southwestern Student Coaching. So we are a division of Southwestern and a division of Southwestern Consulting. So the sales and leadership coaching company that some of the big dogs from my era run. We are an offshoot of that, doing exactly what they do for executives and managers and CEOs and huge, gigantic worldwide companies, only we do it for kids. It's essentially habit-based behavior change through coaching. So it's not training, it's not teaching, but it's literally asking questions and holding kids accountable to living their best life.
Now this is sweet. I know. I remember. I think I knew that Andrew Laws was doing this or started was working with you guys.
Adam Outland. Adam Outland would be our official founder, who is a partner over on the Southwestern Consulting side.
He hosts the Action Catalyst, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Okay. By the way, if you guys haven't checked out Action Catalyst, great podcast. Go check it out.
So I do that, and I still pursue a pretty awesome career in being a thespian, an actor here in New York City. So I've been super fortunate in that way.
Man. Okay, I have a lot of questions. We'll get to the acting in a second because I feel like that's an interesting tangent that we could go on.
Sure.
But so how long have you been working with Southwestern since when did you return? You didn't go straight from books to that.
No, I left the Bookfield in 2003 after 2 summers, and I came back in 2020 during the heart of the pandemic when the world was caving in. And I look back on it now, I'd probably been recruited for about a year, official paperwork signed somewhere around September of 2020. But yeah.
How fun. Dude, I can hear the sirens in the background, and I love
Can you really?
Oh no, I love it because it's just so New York. It's like a soundtrack of New York. You know?
When I first moved here, I moved in with a 92-year-old man, and I lived with him for 4 years. And he would go to visit his grown son in Long Island, and he's like, I can't handle it. It's too quiet out there. All those sounds put me to sleep.
Wow.
Because he had never lived anywhere else. So now I feel like that.
You lived with him till he was 96?
Yep.
Wow. What is it like having a roommate who's 96?
It became one of the greatest relationships of my life. It changed my life forever. It changed my family's life forever. And interesting, I didn't know that I would bring it back to this, but a lot of the skills how I got that apartment were probably I learned on the Bookfield 20 years ago. But
say more.
So I'll give you a little background on this guy. His name is
HQ is with the 96.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. Like, people are like, where are you living? I'm like, I have the best living situation in New York City. You guys are all paying $3,000 a month in rent, $1,500 a month in rent. I was like, I am paying $500 a month straight cash for my own bedroom, my own bathroom, and a roommate that goes to bed at 6 p.m. at night. And it was gigantic. It was gigantic. I won't get in too much of I won't paint the picture of the apartment, but it was a huge apartment that he had raised his kids in. And when I came to NYU for Tisch, I had been out of school for like out of undergrad for a while. And I knew I'm going to continue on to this crazy world of acting where there's a potential where you make no money. So what is the number one thing I can control? My housing and my food. Yeah. And so I take a trip to New York. I didn't even think I didn't think this would come up. So I take a trip to New York in July, and I have to get to school in September. And I literally, I didn't tell anyone, but I thought, if I don't find cheap housing, and at this point I'm a 27-year-old man, if I don't find cheap housing, I'm not going to one of the best grad schools in the country for my profession. And so Craigslist was a big thing. I start virtually knocking on doors. And then I go to NYU off-campus housing registry, and I see this thing on the side of and they're like, hey, yeah, $500 a month, own bedroom, own bathroom. And typically in New York, this is like a huge red flag for, this is going to be some place that you should not be living.
Yeah.
But I walk in and I'm like, no way. This is a joke. This is beautiful. And all I have to do is make friends with a 92-year-old man. I already did this for 2 summers long ago. And I love talking, and I love having conversations. And I literally just went in, and he's like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm a student, and I'd love to live here. And if I don't live here, I'm not going to go to this great grad school. And his son calls me about 30 minutes after I leave, and there was somebody else that was there before me who did not look Norwegian. And if you can deduce from that, Angelo said, "Oh no, I want Andrew to live with me."
Angelo said that.
Angelo Legati, who
understood.
Yes. You can stop me, but I could go off forever.
Oh no, you're saying because you were white.
Yes, because I was white, and the person
that was Italian.
Yes.
Which is a 92-year-old Italian.
Yes.
Which is a huge part of the story.
Yes. And the other guy,
he went through Ellis Island. That guy came. He was like, you called me the Godfather when you show up.
If anyone knows anything about New York, so think of Gangs of New York, right? So he had never lived north in his entire life in 92 years of that parallel north of that part of New York, right?
What part of New York was this permanent?
So we were on the Lower East Side, so FDR and Grand, and he had never lived north of that, and he had actually never lived west of what is called Mott, so it's not that far west. And he was like, no, you can't go to that area. And I was like, Angelo, it's 20 whatever. 20 no is it like 20,
it's past whatever. 1960.
Yes, exactly. And so I lived with him, and you're asking what it was like. This guy, he's inspired me to live to 120, and all my 3 boys and my wife know this, that I will be living to 120 years old because of Angelo Legati. He took the bus every morning to go volunteer at an old folks home and answer the phones. And he passed out and like had to go to the hospital like 5 times while we lived together while he was volunteering. And it always keeps me active. He also said, rest in peace, Angelo. You changed my life.
Oh, he's gone.
Yes, he's gone. But this is also a phenomenal story, which has nothing to do with books. We'll get to books eventually.
It's okay. You're the pony, and this is your tails, man. It's all good.
So we get to basically the end of my grad school, and I'm married, and we have a child. And that's pretty unheard of for young artists. It doesn't always set you up for success. But I was like, you know what? I've done crazier things. I've lived with crazier people. And I said, Angela, we're going to move. We have to move. Right. And like any great host family during the summer, he comes. I'll never forget this because my wife was pregnant. He comes. He's like, Andrew, come here. I need to talk to you. And so I come out of my room, and he has tears in his eyes. And he says, you can't live anywhere else. He said, you can't do it. And I was like, I don't know if he's. So I text his son, who's basically the property manager. And his son is like, oh no, you can't live anywhere. You're keeping my dad vibrant and alive. And he loves living with you. And so we lived there for another 2 years with my wife and our first son in this gigantic 2-bedroom apartment for $1,000 a month.
That's in New York City, in like not a bad part of New York City,
in a very, very good part of New
like,
York City,
in like a way that anything else like that would be, $5,000 in the area.
5 grand, 10.
Well,
more, $7,000, absolutely. And all these apartments were owned. And
dude, they could have shot Friends there. Is how big that apartment was. What you're saying?
Absolutely, yes, they could have shot Friends
and
yes.
How I Met Your Mother.
Yes, and there was a huge balcony that we looked over the Williamsburg Bridge, and I used to sit outside and memorize lines and be like, I can't believe that I was so dead set on getting a cheap HQ that my life has come to this, because it literally gave us a ticket to stay in the game in New York City for the first, 2.5 years or whatever.
That's wild.
Because otherwise it's not possible, right? If your monthly nut is too expensive, you're out. No matter how good you are, you're done. You're done.
You can't live there.
No, you can't.
Have you seen White Collar?
I have not. I know the show well, but
the premise is like this, con man, forger artist guy gets caught by this super sharp FBI guy, but then now he becomes his consultant. But the young hotshot forger art thief guy, he's a suave, good-looking man, blah blah blah, and so they put him he's like on house arrest while he consults with the FBI instead of being in prison. That's like his exchange. So he has like an ankle monitor, so he has to be within like this apartment, but they set him up in this like disgusting apartment. And so he's like shopping at like this thrift shop for like clothes because he's, they don't set him up that well. He meets this lady and she has this she owns this house in a beautiful part of, New York and blah blah. And so he gets to live with her. Just like your story, and it's a story about how he got, but it's the real life story of that. You met Angelo, a 92-year-old man.
We used to go to the movies together, just the two of us. Yeah. And so my grad
Saturday night pizzas.
Yes, they're like out. Oh, here's another crazy story. This is totally like on the Bookfield. I never even thought about this. He'd be like, Andrew, we've got some dessert tonight. Like we've got pie. And he would buy a boxed Entenmann's pie and set it on the heater to keep warm. And I was like, you know what? I ate hot dogs without buns and full packages of tuna, mac and tuna during the summer. This is just fine. Because my roommates would be like, what are you doing? Aren't you doing the thing? I was like, no, man, I'm paying next to nothing here. And I get to go to grad school and be creative.
In New York City.
Yeah. They thought I was crazy, but it's probably because, for 2 summers, I had crazy living situations.
Man, I love New York. I almost moved to New York instead of Portland, but my wife lived here, so we came here.
We're psycho. We're like double and triple bought in, right? So I can talk forever. I'll let you guide that conversation, but we tried to move out, or at least not out of New York City, just up and maybe like buy a place. I don't know. 7 years ago or so, whatever that number is. And then we got into one of the most famous buildings in New York City, which is called Manhattan Plaza, which is where it's a bunch of artists. Alicia Keys grew up here. Timothy Chalamet grew up here. Al Pacino used to live here. Sam Jackson was a security guard. There's like Tony Award winners. And so instead of moving out of the city where it's quieter, we doubled down into a little place called Hell's Kitchen with 3 boys in a 1-bedroom. And then a year later, the pandemic hit.
Fun. It was good times.
Yeah, there we go.
A good old pandy. And it hit pretty hard in New York. That was That was
Just
wild. Oh man. So okay, so hang on. So we went on a tangent. I love This is why I love my job. So you go back during the pandemic to Southwestern,
yeah,
and
yes,
how did
yes.
you know how did you end up doing this instead of like the other coaching? Like why this?
Yeah, actually that's a really good question. How do I answer this best? Number one is my wife and I ran two of the top after school enrichment franchises pre-pandemic in New York. So we were had 40, 50 different employees that worked for us, teachers that would go out to schools and teach Lego robotics, debate, chess, science,
Hmm.
all sorts of different things. And we were really making some headway. Oh, there we go, chess. Andres, now you're going to hate me because I actually taught chess for a long time.
And you didn't
Uh,
know who Magnus was
I didn't know
as a
Magnus.
Norwegian chess teacher?
I didn't know.
Shame. This has
I
been a
would.
good episode, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you. Unbelievable.
So, so in New York, pretty much overnight, everything goes. We can't physically get our teachers into the schools, right? So we can't get our teachers into the schools. So and the schools aren't going to pay us for a service that we don't provide. So we all of a sudden
Oh,
have zero revenue. Now the unique thing is that it's really good for my wife and I. Like we were happy to not be in business together anymore. And Dave Brown had been those are my kids in the background. Can you hear that?
I can. That's okay though.
God, I'm so sorry.
Hey, you're
I'm
doing
so
your thing,
sorry.
man. We
Yeah.
all sold books.
All right.
If
Um,
people listen,
so
it is what it is.
so Dave and I had been talking for maybe 2, 3 years and just keeping in contact, all the time. And I watched them build consulting. So I watched them build that. Well, I
Yeah.
lived in LA for a couple of years. One of my best buddies who I brought out to sell books lived in Chicago, and he would go up and see them in plays. And so I watched them from the ground up. And eventually he says, hey, and then I had always used Hans for jobs in between um, acting gigs. So if I
Oh,
knew there
love
was going to be a
Hans.
big spell, I'd be like, Hans, what do you got for me? Do you have anything? I know you don't because you don't do gig work, but I would call Hans. And then in our after school enrichment program, we called Hans to possibly, we didn't ever engage with it, but to possibly use him as a recruitment service to find an executive director. So I kind of
Oh, I see.
always like we were going to use his services to hire someone. And so eventually I'm like, all right, there's this student coaching thing that they keep like plugging in. I feel very passionate that young kids get thrown under the bus for being lazy and XYZ, and it's typically the problem of the people that mentor them and not the kid themselves. And whether that mentor be a parent, be somebody in the community, be somebody who doesn't know how to connect with them. And I've always used business coaching, not consulting, but business coaching in other areas in my businesses that I've run. So
Mm.
so I'm like a super fan of coaching, and so the time I my industry and acting was down, uh, we
Yeah.
were still in a 1-bedroom apartment, and we had this. This is another book. We had like a storage unit. We had a freaking storage unit with Wi-Fi, with all of our after-school enrichment supplies that I could go to every day, like an office. And it
That's
wasn't.
brilliant.
And I didn't even think twice about it. I was like, no, I'm just going to go sit there, and I'm going to start dialing and start growing this student coaching. People be like, well, you're doing what? And I just didn't even, I don't know if it's because of books, but it probably, some of those muscles are still in there that who cares where you're working as long as you're making progress. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's funny because um I mean, and this could be a little bit of a tangent too, but what this has come up on the show before, but we haven't talked about it in a while, but what seems normal to you after the experience of selling books
Yeah.
to what seems outrageous to like other people, non-book
Sure.
people.
Sure.
It's amazing the gap of incredulity. Is that the word? Like when
And
people are like, I can't believe you're doing that. But to
Yeah.
you, you're just like, why wouldn't I do that? It's like that's
Yep.
what a book
And
person
then
would.
and then some of that, depending on how many summers you spent on the book field, can also be unhealthy. You're like, you got to get yourself out of a storage
Yeah.
unit, get into an office and feel like you're a grown, you have 3 kids, Andrew,
Yeah.
and you
Yeah.
need
Yeah.
to get health insurance for your family.
Yeah, that's because, and this is not to throw Southwestern under the bus, but just,
No, it's all good.
it is what it is. Which, before I say this, by the way, we've had a lot of Southwestern consulting people lately. It's not been intentional. It's just how the cycle has been going. So people, and you're not the first person to say that Dave Brown was just really persistent. Sarah Jane Landis said the same thing a few episodes
Gosh,
ago.
he's just
He's just like,
so
he just
persistent.
continues. But to talk about like the unhealthy part of Southwestern, it's beautiful. It's a beautiful place to learn about sales, to learn about problem solving, to
Yeah,
learn about how to be able to just like deal with shit hitting the fan on a consistent basis when you're
sure.
running a business, which happens a lot if you're, especially if you're a startup, if you're just starting out.
No.
The problem is it doesn't teach you to go past that,
Mm-mm.
like the scaling of it and
Mm-hmm.
the like what you just said, right? Like, hey man, like it's great that your business is kicking ass and low expenses is important, but at some point optically you need to change, just because if you're like, for example, we do podcast consulting, and if you tuned into me and I'm on a Zoom call with like my AirPods, or not even AirPods, with like just those like Apple plug-in
Yeah.
headphones, and I'm trying to coach you on how to run a podcast, it doesn't devalue my experience in any way, but
No.
you would be like,
Yeah.
you don't seem like
Absolutely.
a professional.
Absolutely.
you know
It's the old saying, yes gets you out of Egypt, but no takes you to the promised land. And my wife, who has a
Mm.
phenomenal online business, is so good at saying no. I'm like, well, why don't you do this? You can do this, you can do this, you can do this. And she's like, no, because I don't want to. And I'm going to do it a different way. And I envy that. I envy that. And my time on the book field, I'm incredibly thankful for. But it was a lot of stress when I left. Not that anybody put on me. They just taught me
Oh,
at JYD how to. I actually had one of the most thankful events in my life was how I left the book field.
oh.
I had told, you know, I had told Tim Ritzer and Travis Wilson, I had said, hey, I'm literally in a professional program. I'm getting a Bachelor of Fine Arts in acting. I am going to be an actor. Okay. That's what I'm going to do. I can tell you how I got recruited and how that all happened. And I was like, but I'm not going to stay here and build an organization. I think I could, right? It's the Leonardo DiCaprio says to Jack Nicholson, I could be you, but I don't want to be you. Whatever. In The Departed.
In Departed, yeah.
I said I could, but I'm not going to. And so after my second summer, which would have been my junior year of college or my sophomore year of college, whatever year of college, I said, if I get an acting job, I'm going to do this, guys. Like, I'm going to do this. And they were just like, okay. Yeah.
That's sweet.
They're like, okay. Yep, absolutely. And it was about 5 weeks before sales school. And I got a call from an acting job that eventually changed my life. And I used a lot of book selling stuff to get my job that summer acting. To make things concise, I remember, I'll never forget. I will never, ever, 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 ever forget this. I'm sitting in the Carleton School of Business at the University of Minnesota, which is right next to the Rarig Center, which is the acting center. Like, they're right across the hall, diametrically opposed buildings on a campus. And I said, hey, Tim, I said, I'm sorry. I got a call last night. There's a Shakespeare company that they're starting in Provincetown, Massachusetts. And they asked me to play a couple roles. And he goes, dang. He goes, dang. We're sorry to miss you, but that's your dream. How awesome is that? Go crush it. And if you want to come back, call me. Because we were already going to study abroad in our acting program the next fall. So he's like, and if you want to come back, you call me next January. And I was like, oh,
Wow.
This is amazing.
Okay, so this is a lesson to be learned. By the way, Tim, we need you on the show ASAP.
One
But
of the salt of the earth, one of the best human beings in the history of the world.
Tim Ritzeri is a phenomenal man.
Yep.
Um, I've gotten the
Yep.
pleasure to get to know him a little bit. He's a fan of the show.
Good. Perfect.
Yeah, he's
Hi,
great.
Tim.
Yeah, yeah. He's probably listening. He'll probably listen because he'll recognize the name. He usually starts with those. So hi, Tim. That's a lesson in leadership if I've ever heard one for anybody listening. I mean,
There's there's
wow.
another famous story. It's not that famous, but Bob Iger, when he was running, well, he's back now, but his first stint at Disney, who David somebody or other who left Disney to go into the personal development space. I wish I could remember his name. Somebody look it up. But anyways, he was like the VP of sales. So he is one of the people that were responsible for the acquisition of Lucasfilm, right? He was one of the people that was responsible for Marvel, right? Being under Disney, all that stuff. He's passed away since. He actually just passed away in this last year from some heart complications. But Dave did.
David Gordon?
No, what I'm going to have to look this up now, unfortunately. But I'm going to finish this story. So he tells Bob Iger, he says, Bob, I'm going to move on. Okay. He didn't even know where he was going to move on to. But he says, Bob, I'm going to move on. Bob says, please come into my office. He says, all right, Dave, can you sit down? Or no, he actually said, before he sat down, he said, Dave, is there anything I can do to change your mind? Right. And Dave has an option to say, yeah, actually there's some other stuff that I kind of want differently. Dave just goes, honestly, no. And Bob Iger says, sit down then, right in the chair across from me, because I want to be your biggest fan moving forward.
Wow.
It almost makes me cry just thinking of it right now.
That's beautiful, but like the fact that that's exactly what I mean. Because it's not it's rare occurrence in our episodes where the person leaves and when they left I mean it happens more often, I guess, nowadays that we hear it, but
Sure.
out of the 200 episodes plus that we've had, it's got to be in low 20%.
Yeah, absolutely.
maybe 15% of our episodes where the person says what you're saying. And that speaks a lot to Tim, because
Absolutely.
he recognized what you needed to get out of Southwestern and how much you could give back. And when time came, he supported you.
And I was a top first year. I mean, we had a baller first year. And then I brought out a top team too. It wasn't like number one. I
was going to ask you, especially if you sold a lot of books and he let you go like that.
Yeah, it wasn't a lot of books. I don't remember. I mean, I actually do remember the numbers, but I don't remember what those numbers meant comparative to what they mean today. So it's kind of moot. But I was probably in the power division. I think I was number 20 or 30, maybe 35 as a first year. And then I brought out the number 19 team.
That's a big deal. I mean, it wasn't like you sold 2 summers for a cumulative of 800 units for 2 summers.
No, I got some big checks.
You had potential.
Yeah.
You could be him, but you just didn't want to be him.
I also probably couldn't be him. That's like
that's nobody can be Tim. There's legends of Tim. Who was saying this to us that might have been, it doesn't matter. Some other alumni was telling us a story about how he went to go work out with Tim. And by the way, people who listen, he runs a ton. He runs.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like marathons a lot. And the way he trains for a marathon is he runs 30 miles 3 times before the marathon. And then he's like, okay, I'm good. So that guy one time was going to go work out. So whoever told me this story was going to go work out with Tim. And Tim's like, okay, well, you go play basketball. I'm going to go play pickup basketball. And I'll just go run the treadmill. And Tim started running the treadmill. He goes, how long are you going to run the treadmill? He goes, I'm probably just going to try to break the machine. And so this dude, Tim, puts that thing at like top miles per hour. I think it went up to 13 miles per hour. He puts it at full incline and he just starts going.
Yeah.
And then the machine broke. And like within the hour.
He did.
So the other person comes back, the guy that told me the story comes back from playing basketball or whatever, and he's like, Tim's just sitting at the lobby. And he's like, what are you doing here? He goes, the machine broke. So he like broke the machine. It couldn't handle going It was crazy, like
Tim,
legendary story
that's
of
so
Tim.
funny.
Tim was great.
Tim gave a Sunday talk, and I think he like had a bunch of top. I don't know what they were called, like DSLs, DSMs at that point. Underneath him, and then Fred Prevost was above him. So Tim had recruited some big dynamos, right? So Tim flies into a Sunday meeting, and he starts talking to us about, hey, you got to do something for yourself on Sunday, right? And we're like, okay, what does Tim do for himself, And he's like, I go running, and he's like, and when I'm running, if somebody pulls up and tries to talk to me, I don't look at them. I just keep running because it's my time.
So good.
He's like ruthless about his running. I love it.
He's a freak. Tim's like built different.
And he's beautiful. He's beautiful. Like he has the exact opposite of the hair I have. Right?
Yeah, same. Yeah, he's out there killing. He's batting 1,000.
Absolutely.
Solid.
His
Dude.
wife is amazing.
Yeah, Kim, she's great. Yeah,
Kim's awesome. Just such a cool family.
Yeah. We love you, Tim. Hopefully we'll get you on the show. Did you wait, tangent question. Did your wife sell books?
No. And
no. That's interesting.
No.
Okay. Just I'm throwing this out there. It doesn't. We can edit this part out, but I'm throwing this out there. We're thinking about doing an episode with spouses of people who sold books, but the spouse did not sell books.
Oh, you should. Oh, she will come on, and she will be brutally honest, because we've been together forever. I'm not that old. I mean, I don't think I'm that old. I'm and we've been together for 17 years. So I met her 2 years after the Bookfield, and she's just so besides the stories that I told with a couple of our best buddies that I brought out that she does know, besides those stories, this has been her reintroduction to Southwestern these last 3 years.
Right. So you didn't talk to her about anything of your experience at all? Is what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I did, but my wife and I have a common understanding that if she would have known me during those years, we probably wouldn't be together.
Understandable.
Yeah. And you know what? I'm like, we probably wouldn't.
You know what? Honestly,
I kind of married up. I married up a little bit. I'm married up. And I married up and I needed a little more party.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Absolutely.
My wife, I mean, now because I do this, she's heard all the. I mean, my wife's she's done with the lingo. She'll be like, oh, the HQ. I know what that. Like she gets it. Yep. But when I first was telling her about my job, and I've told this story recently too, but long, I'll make this shorter, but I'll tell you what the gist of it is. When I first went to meet her dad, they had family friends over. Or just like one of her dad's friends was there, and it turns out that he was a book guy, and we found out during the conversation that we both sold books in front of her dad, who I had just met for the first time, and he starts praising, like he's like, oh, if you sold books, then you must be the and her dad's just like, and my wife never thought that would come up, and every time I bring it up, she's originally she goes, I can't believe you did that, like this is such a weird. It's such a, and she's a counselor, so she has a master's in like psychology, and she just psychoanalyzes it like, wow.
So funny. What a great story.
Oh, it's so good, man. So okay, so you get into this, you get into student coaching because you guys have had kind of a background in this. What does it look like now? So what is your day to day? What are you doing? What are you excited? What gives you life about your job? In today's world. Great
question. What gives me life about my job is I get to work at home with the kids. No, not at all. I'd rather be in an office. What gives me life about my job is for whatever reason, I've never really had to explain this to people, is that I do believe very highly in teens and young adults, that they're thrown under the bus way too much, that they have a lot more potential than people ever give them credit for, right? And in the great traditions of other societies, it's the responsibility of the elders to bring the young people to the next phase of life, and that it's not their fault. It's most likely it's most likely an us problem and not a them problem.
So Hold on, let me pause you there.
Yeah, go.
Not to interject, but so when you say throw under the bus, you're talking about like they're kind of
Gen,
not set up for success.
lazy. Yeah, Gen Z is lazy. Gen Z, they're on their
I understand.
phones all the time.
I
They'll
understand.
never go anywhere. They're always entitled, right? They don't have any work ethic.
Basically, what every generation
Yeah.
two like the generation, but so we're millennials,
Yes.
right? So we're both right, but before millennials, there was so two generations prior. So the grandparents, quote
Right.
unquote, of the generation looks down at the two generations down, going their kids going, oh, they suck, but that's what they were being told about themselves to generate. It's cycle. It's a
Yeah.
cycle.
Go hang out with a 13-year-old and ask really good questions, and you'll find out where the world's going, and it will give you hope.
Oh yeah, no. So
It will give you
tangent.
hope.
So tangent on that, and to let you continue.
Yeah.
My wife is the youngest of six kids, and
Ah,
she's
yeah.
36. So her siblings have
Perfect.
had kids.
Yep.
So for example, 2 nights ago, our
Yeah.
house was my sister-in-law was here with her four daughters, who are the youngest of which is I think 13 or 14,
Okay.
and the oldest is like 24. So
Yep.
I was literally hanging out with that demographic and
Sure.
just having really good conversations about film, cinema, philosophy,
Hmm.
perseverance. And I was like, wow, these girls are sharp, sharp.
Hmm.
This generation is just fine. So to your point, yes, sir.
So here's a version, and as we know on the Bookfield, all families think their kids are the best and the worst at the same time, right? It's like they're not just another human being. So my son is a musician, and he'll listen to this, and maybe he won't listen to this. He doesn't care. This is way too long of an attention span for him. Is he's taking piano lessons, and he quit them, and I'm like, God dang it. Ask me about that. Ask me about my relationship with quitting and how I feel about that on the book field too, because that I have some very strong opinions about that, and
Okay.
I'm very okay to talk about it as a team lead in Southwestern student coaching.
Okay. We'll
Okay,
talk about quitting when we get to the Southwestern, when you're doing
sure.
I'll bring
So
it up.
my son stops playing piano. My biggest regret in life is from 8th grade to 10th grade. I stopped playing piano because it wasn't cool, and because it wasn't. I didn't care if it wasn't cool, but it got in the way of sports. When I picked back up at 10th grade, I missed those 2 very vital years of music theory, right?
Huge.
Of how to jam with people.
Hmm.
So so my son quits piano. It's a whole nother story. I didn't appreciate how he quit, right? I didn't like the way it went down. But I was like, you know what? Whatever. This is it. 2 weeks later, he knows like 17 more songs. And I'm like, what is the deal here? You quit piano. And he's like, oh, I just went on YouTube. And he went on YouTube and he learned like Sweet Child of Mine. We went to a Jean Baptiste concert, if you know who that is,
Hmm.
on last week for his birthday, and he's like, oh yeah, now I listen to it, and then I go on YouTube, and then I listen for the bass line, and now I can play it. And I'm like, listen, and so this is back to student coaching. If we think that the next generation has to learn the way we learned,
We're screwing up.
we're screwed. Yeah, it's our fault. It's
Yeah.
way our fault, because he knows already what he can learn things faster. There's other things that he needs a coach for, but that's just the one
Yeah.
little, eye in
Right.
the.
Which I think highlights the importance of what you're doing. Also, Brian Harbin's doing something kind of similar with
Mhm.
grit.org. He's another book
Sure.
guy, but
Okay.
there's a big movement now within the alumni community to start kind of, even within the company itself, they're starting to do like the lead, which
Yeah.
like they're to
Right.
test out this new flagship product to kind of maybe move away from books and have this become the next generation
Sure.
of things that college kids sell door to door.
Yep.
It's all focused around targeting those like you know early teen to
Hmm.
like early young adults
Yeah.
age demographic. And the whole idea is to teach them, instead of how to play the piano, it's like, hey, what is the importance of committing to a goal?
Right.
So if your goal is to be this good at a piano, it doesn't really matter how you get there, if you want to go through YouTube or a teacher. But the more important part is like your outlook on it. Are you talking to yourself in a way that's healthy as a musician? Are you talking to yourself
Right.
in a way that helps you stay on schedule? Do you have a schedule about when you're going to learn these songs? Like, it doesn't matter
Right.
if you're going to learn them to YouTube, learn it through
Right.
YouTube. Just put a schedule on it, right?
Yeah.
Or so, and teaching these principles, these Southwestern principles, to the youth. And that's amazing because it sounds like what you guys are doing is teaching those things.
Yep.
Is
Yep.
that accurate?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're teaching the mindset and the decision-making principles, and we're doing it through private pay, right? So families that want it for their kids. And then we have uniquely, we have a nonprofit as well. So like Chip Gaines, right? Wrote a big
Yeah.
check. He was on Action Catalyst podcast with
Mhm.
Adam, and he was like, "Oh, I love what you're doing. Absolutely. I'll sponsor some underserved youth." And so
That's sweet.
we've got a huge way to do that, to be able to deliver this to people that couldn't otherwise afford it.
So tell me a little bit more about that, because I think that is the one gist of this whole, that the only,
Yeah.
if you will, pre-approach that we got was
Okay.
you were doing this with that, and I was
Yeah.
really excited to talk to you about this. My dad started a nonprofit when we were kids for
Okay.
kids who were underprivileged, to
Yeah.
get allow them to have an outlet through soccer.
Sure.
So I that this is a really special place in my heart when people
Sure.
are really helping the youth in this way. So I think that's cool. By the way, Chip, if you're listening, you're welcome on the show anytime.
Yes.
um, but tell me a little more how that side of things got started, and what it's at now.
Yeah. So I think to make a long story longer, for me, the passion to it is because my dad made a great living for our family, and my mom as well. They were awesome in Lewiston, town of 1,100 people. My dad grew up without any indoor plumbing. My dad's not that old, right? He grew up without any indoor plumbing till he was 18. And so he didn't have much. They had to tie a rope from the house to the pole shed to the barn to the outhouse in northern Minnesota. So, and the rope was for when there was whiteout conditions, that they wouldn't lose their way back home. Okay.
Right.
So okay.
Mhm.
So I did not, very clear, did not grow up in poverty. Right. But I always understood kind of where I came from and the hard work that my family had done to get to where we were.
Which is huge.
Right.
Just congrats on that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Well, not to me, to my family, to my mom and
To your
dad.
parents. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what happens is we start the student coaching, and you've got to, any business, you've got to get a proof of concept, and you've got to make sure the product works, right? And so we call alumni, right? We call people that have bought books before. We just start calling a bunch of people to invest in their own kids, right? And it was great. It's great. But people that don't understand coaching, right? People that don't understand, hey, coaching has changed my business or my life as an adult, really don't understand, through no fault of their own, how it could change their kids' lives. Okay. And so we're educating a lot of these families on why to invest in coaching. Okay. And Adam Outland and myself and Whitney Armstrong, who's
Love
been,
Whitney.
yeah, Whitney's amazing.
I
She's
sold
like,
with Whitney in the
oh,
same.
she's my ride or die. She is crushing it.
Whitney is the coolest of coolest.
Nobody can ever have Whitney. Whitney is literally not single-handedly. She's a huge part of how we're growing and recruiting. She handles most everything for us, and she's amazing.
She's awesome.
She's such a star. So we all think, well, how can we get these to other families who can't afford it? Because the idea is if you go into any inner city, or if you go into any place in poverty and you give them resources, they're like, absolutely, they'll eat them up. They won't ask, what does coaching do? They'll say, absolutely, you can change the mindset of my son or daughter.
Yeah.
They're like, yeah, no brainer.
Yeah,
But
because
who pays for it?
any parent wants their kids to do better than they. I mean, even
Right.
I hinted at this earlier. It's like, if it's like, you're probably doing better
Yeah.
than, hopefully your kids do better than you. That's like the
Right.
ultimate parent goal, right?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So what happens is, to Adam's credit, he at some event, or he gets hooked up with a donor who donates to a foster care system. And most of the time in foster youth, you get a check when you're 18, say, hey, thanks, but good luck with the rest of your life. And we started coaching some of those kids on that transition into the real world. And it just stemmed from there. It's ballooned from there, the nonprofit. We're getting new donors every single day. We now have a button through Southwestern that people don't have to sponsor a full kid, like a full program. They can just give a little bit, and they can give it recurring. And we've got a young man out of Long Island right now who's going through coaching. And yeah, I think I can share this, that Jake Chesney is helping get through coaching. And this guy grew up in shelters and hotels with his mom until he was 11th grade, and in 11th grade, having found stable housing, his GPA jumped like 2 points, and they want to catch him and make sure he finishes his senior year in a good spot. So
That's
um,
amazing.
yeah.
So what's the age range of the kids you're talking to?
Typically it's 13 to 21, but we've
Yeah.
coached as young as 10 and as old as 28, and that more looks more like life coaching.
What is the most like common like I guess have you found that it's different for like the different age levels? Like, do you find that like the younger teens are a little bit more resistant to it, or they're a little bit more, or is there like have you found a difference in the because that's a huge shift. Like a
Yeah,
13-year-old versus an 18-year-old is a different person.
sure.
So
It's
like,
good.
how are you guys like
Good,
managing that?
good question. We have different coaches that prefer to coach different ages.
Oh,
Um, and then we do a free coaching session for everyone. So it all depends on the kid, but a lot of the 13-year-olds, they need to get on schedule, right? They need to figure out even what a schedule looks like. So their parents aren't so stressed out at home about, hey, you got to do your homework here. You got to do homework there. And then what I find personally is the parents that are thinking the biggest are like, listen, their prefrontal cortex is not formed yet, and get positive thoughts and positive self-talk in their minds now while they're going through puberty. Because what happens if you get a 20, 18, 19, 21 year old, right, who's maybe not doing so well in college, or maybe doing exceptionally well, right? We have D1 athletes, maybe they're doing exceptionally well,
hmm.
but they don't know, just like on the Bookfield, they don't know how to take a step back and enjoy life.
Yeah.
They don't know how to put their mind to something they enjoy. It's almost too late at that point. So we want to catch them a little younger.
Hmm. That's sweet, man. I think that's so cool. So, if people want to become a donor to this nonprofits part of it,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how can they do this? What's like? What are the steps? Is there a link that you guys do? Can we put it in the
Yep.
description
Yeah.
below?
So,
And
so there's a link. We'll put it in show notes, and it's through Southwestern. So it's a tax deductible donation through Inspire Kindness, that we have earmarked for student coaching. And you can donate. You can sponsor a whole kid in coaching. You can get your business. We've had that before to give your charitable giving, or if you just want to give, 25 to $250 a month, you can click on the link. It's super, super simple, and you put in your credit card or your ACH draft, and it comes out every month, and you're changing lives, because all money goes directly to the coach that's coaching that kid. We don't have any overhead, if that makes sense.
yeah,
I mean,
so
that's the biggest thing in especially nonprofit youth organizations, is where does the money go? Good thing is it goes directly to the kids and the person that's coaching the kids.
that's a big deal. It's not going to like keep the lights on, which is a big, your money
Sure.
feels more tied to the success of the kid than just like, although that would
Absolutely.
still be helpful. Like if you need to keep the lights on, that still helps. But like,
Yeah.
it's more tangible, the change or the impact that you can have.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
sweet. I guess last question is how big is the nonprofit program? I mean, like, do you have like a couple of kids, or has this been a thing that you guys have been working on a long time now? That it's like you got 100 kids that are in the nonprofit
Yeah,
coach.
good question. I think there's 20 to 30 right now in the nonprofit. We had to start somewhere so we could go and tell organizations that, hey, growth in mindset, habits, action is trackable, right? So we got 20 to 30 there. We've coached 309 different countries. Take so most of them have been private pay, but there's probably a good possibility that eventually the nonprofit overtakes it as we get mass amounts of students that are underserved. Uh,
Yeah,
Southwestern principles, right?
that's huge. That's
Yeah,
huge, and that's a real impact. I mean, we're talking about like the kids that probably end up needing that coaching the most,
yeah,
right? And so then
yep,
that it could be paid forward that way. You got the other kids see this kid succeeding, and then it starts breaking belief barriers, and that's really
absolutely.
sweet.
I mean, that's where we'll uncrack this, unlock this, crack it open, whatever analogy you want to use. At a certain point, coaching will become cool for kids. It will become as cool as getting a phone. And when it becomes cool as getting a phone or Kyrie's, it's over. It's done. Now we just need to find enough people to coach them.
Yeah, then
You know what I mean?
more as more students appear, more teachers need to be found as well.
Exactly. Yep.
That makes sense, man. That's sweet. Real quick before we get into Southwestern stuff, I want to talk to you a little bit about your acting career because you said there was like a
Sure.
book story about how you got into acting and like what happened as far as like into Tish. Is that what you were saying? That there was like a
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. So my acting career, I've been extremely, extremely fortunate to go to two of the top acting schools in the country and really the world. And I could go off on a tangent on another podcast about all of that. All of these you have to audition for, right? They do not take many people. Some famous people come out of it. Some great writers, some great directors, some just great humans who choose not to act afterwards. But the NYU part that has a direct correlation to books is this is literally one of the most proud things that I've ever done in my life. Is I'm in Los Angeles teaching chess, not well, and definitely not as well as you would on this, but I'm teaching chess in Los Angeles for my day job, and I need some like steroids for my career because I had done a couple of TV shows. I did ER, like the last season of
oh
ER, and I was like, I can do this, but I need some more connections. Like, I need some more connections. So I auditioned for all the grad schools and I get into NYU, kind of fast forward, and they call me and they like do a callback weekend where you all kind of come and you act for them and do different classes. It's very intense.
yeah.
And at the end, the next Monday, they start giving out offers. Well, they called me on a Monday. Okay. And they called me on a Monday. And I understand that at this point, they're a pony because they're buyers of me because
Yeah.
they didn't call me 2 weeks later. I was one of their first that they called. Okay. I'm just kind of using deductive reasoning. It's like, okay, they call me on a Monday. I know how much this thing costs. It's going to cost me about $50,000 a year and to go. And you can't
Dang.
work during grad school. You cannot work during grad school. So lifetime value, you're coming out with 150 grand worth of debt. And I also wasn't going to go back and sell books during grad school because you want acting
Sure.
jobs, right?
Yeah, in the summer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just doing the math and I'm like, lifetime value, this is probably like 500,000, $1 million of just loans and jobs. And so they give me an offer and they give me a financial aid offer. And I was like, guys, I'm pulling into Whole Foods right now and I can barely like go buy some peanut butter. I was like, I appreciate the offer, but I'm going to need more. And I know this because I've done some pre-approach on a friend of mine who was an undergrad that had gone to NYU, and that friend hadn't asked for more. I was like, well, I'm going to see what's possible here. And so I just tell them, sorry. And they're like, okay. And it wasn't that big of a deal. They were like, okay, let me go see what we can do because they've had people ask this before. And it was just like books. I used all my Bookfield stuff for this. I was like, well, the person that wants it the most loses, right? So don't want it. And so they called me back in like a week. They're like, okay, we have this offer for you. And it was pretty significant at that point. It was like $33,000 out of the $50,000 a year. And I was like, thanks. But I have to tell you, I'm out here already in the world, right? And I can't quite wrap my mind around it. I can't say yes. I need some time to think. And I don't think they had anybody ever do this. I mean, this is maybe me being too thinking that I hold too much weight, but I don't think, because they were like, what? You're not coming? I was like, no, I want to come. No, I would like to come,
This
but
is
I'm
my
not coming
dream.
for that. Yeah, this is my dream, but I'm not coming for that. So they call back a week later. So whatever, it's about 10 days now. And he goes, we have to move on. We have to offer this to somebody else unless you're coming here. I said, fair enough. He said, what would it take for you to come here? And I in the back of my mind, I had Travis Wilson, who's like, well, you don't get what you don't ask for. The worst they can say is no. And if you know exactly what you want, just go after it. So I said, okay, fair enough. I want all tuition paid for. I want a stipend of $20,000 to live in New York. Okay. And I think I said a couple other things. And they go, no. Sorry, we can't do that. I was like, okay. They're like, what? I said, what can you do? And he's like, well, I don't know. What would make you come here? I was like, if I could wrap my mind around around getting school paid for, I could feasibly then wrap my mind around what it would cost to live in New York City, right? Which
Yeah.
is what came
Without and
into
not work.
Angelo. Yes, with Angelo, because then I knew I all I had to do was control living expenses and eating expenses.
Yeah, and then you're
Okay.
good.
And
Yeah.
I knew how to do that.
Because you didn't
And
need transportation. You're in New
exactly.
York City.
Exactly. So he calls. So Victor calls the dean there, or associate dean, whatever it is, and he goes, give me 1 second. And I'm in the back of like teaching chess, and I'm like, I'm on the best negotiation of all time, and I'm going to be an artist, and this is amazing. And he calls back literally like 20 seconds later, not 20 seconds, but a minute and a half. He's like, I talked to our chair, and we can do that for you. Will you say yes? And I'm like, yes. And I'm basically peeing my pants at this point.
Yeah.
Because in 10 days, I'm doing the math, and I've negotiated $500 million in lifetime value. And I was like, I can't believe I just did that.
That's
I cannot believe I just did that. And I show up
Feel
to
felt
NYU.
found.
Yeah, feel felt found. I cannot believe I just did that. And I show up, and people are like, they only give, full scholarships to like very chosen few. And I couldn't tell anyone because I was like, they didn't give it to me. I just asked for it.
Yeah. It wasn't the original offer.
Yeah, it wasn't the original offer.
You
I just asked if they wanted more books.
you crewed it.
I did. And I'm so happy. And then I just kept asking for more money as I was there.
That's so wild. Okay, so let me ask you about your acting specific. So,
Sure. Yeah.
when you watch, because we've had Mary Meyer was an actress
Mhm.
that we've had on the show, and she's in Atlanta doing acting for
Yep.
like commercials and stuff. And
Yep.
when you act, you're on stage in Broadway. Is that right?
Yep. So I've done Broadway, film, and television. So I've done a
Wow.
bunch of TV shows. I've done 3 Broadway shows.
What's your favorite?
Originally, it was Broadway for sure, because that was my dream.
Really?
Growing up in a farm town milking cows, I came and I saw the show called Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk. You can look it up. It's probably how my wife and I, it's how my wife and I fell in love anyways, because I'm like a hoofing tap dance groupie, rhythm tap.
Is it Bring the Show, Bring the Funk?
Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk. Savion Glover, Jason Samuel Smith, this guy named Dulé Hill, who was on the West Wing for a while, and then on Monk. I saw them all, and I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to do that. And that's what I'm going to do. And I knew that in like 8th grade. I had a vision. I was like, I knew that. That's what I'm going to do. But now it's definitely, I love film. I love film the most. I love film. I love being on a film set. I love creating characters. And I love being the lead on film set. That's a lot of fun.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
What are like the biggest differences between like that shocked you? Because you obviously were like really in love with the stage performance aspect of it, but when you went to film, what was like different that like you had to kind of get used to or adjust to?
Well, the cool part about film is that the schedule is more like summer camp. So if you're filming 16 hours a day, you don't really have time to do anything else. So you don't comprehend, well, maybe I should, pick up the chicken from the grocery store, and maybe I should, take the dogs out for a walk. You just say, this is it. And this is an intense period of time where I'm going to go all in. And whatever happens at the end, I give it up. Okay. What did shock me, and it's probably, who knows? I'm not a huge name yet in acting. I'm helping run in Southwestern student coaching. But there is a little different acting style. And the cool part is you get to learn that. And I'm in the point in my career where I still get to learn that every day. I took 7 years of training to be on stage. There's no real training to be on a movie set. There's no real training to be on the Bookfield. You just got to be on the Bookfield and then figure it out.
Just gonna try it, yeah.
You just got to try it. So that's fun.
So when you went to school, you were mainly prepping for stage acting.
I mean, most of the accredited universities here, and that doesn't mean they're good or bad. It just means they're accredited because you can get a degree, fall into or lean into stage actor training, as this will make you a great actor. Is that if you know Shakespeare, if you know the classic plays, and if you can do that emotionally, mentally, right? then you can transfer those skills to film, to television, to all of that. So that's most of the training. There's a little bit of on-camera training, but on camera has a lot of tricks. But I also find it incredibly, incredibly challenging. You have to be in the moment. You whatever the camera is looking is finding, right? Whatever the camera sees, whatever you're thinking is that's what the camera will see. And as a performer, you do not have the luxury of editing or directing. You don't know what the final product is going to be. So you have to be your best on every single take. In the theater, you're like, well, I got tomorrow, I can go do that show again tomorrow. And so that's fun. I really enjoy that. But I enjoy probably the film part a little bit more now. Yeah.
Do you find that when you're watching film, you are more critical or more like aware of what's happening? That it's
Sure.
like, does it like is it like a thing where you worked at McDonald's so now you can't eat at McDonald's? You know what I'm saying? Like where it's
Sure.
just like,
Yeah.
I can't enjoy movies anymore because I'm just like watching how much they suck or whatever.
Yeah, it depends because there was a period of my life, absolutely, and not that I would judge, but I would be like, I hate this guy's acting, and my wife or somebody else would be like, he's amazing, and I'd throw up my hands. I was like, oh, this is all subjective, right? But what everyone sees at the end of when you watch your favorite next Netflix show or CBS show, there's so much collaboration that goes into that. There is so much. There's an editor, there's a lighter, there's a director, there's studio heads who are saying the final cut. And you might look one way and they don't edit that part in. And you're like, I gave the best look of all time. I mean, I'll never forget this. I'll never forget this part. So I go in, I'd shot this big thing on Blue Bloods and it was going to
all good.
We're all good. So I had shot this big thing on Blue Bloods and it was like 2-3 big scenes. And I went in to do some little voiceovers, like change some stuff. And I was like, how about the other scenes? And they looked at me and they're like, what other scenes? And it didn't make it in the final cut. But, I don't have any control over that. Right.
Wow.
So you kind of have to give it up and you have to be very present. Yeah.
That's amazing. So, and when you, I guess let me ask you this, because listen, I love cinema. There's no secret. I think when I had Mary, I was geeking out, nerding out. I'm a big, is it cinephile? Is it?
Yeah, cinephile.
Yeah. And when you look at like let me just start with this. What's a film recently that you watched? You're like, wow, that was across the board because of what you know of what it takes to produce that. Right. That you went, that was underrated.
Well, I mostly watch kids' films,
which are good sometimes.
Yeah. Top Gun Maverick. Okay. So Top Gun Maverick is just mass population eye candy. But I've seen that 7 times. And I've also seen that because the last film I did, which was a number of years ago, like 2 years ago, the last film I did, a lot of the film crew had worked on Top Gun Maverick. Okay. And my oldest son's name is Maverick. So I'm kind of emotionally bought in. Right. But it's amazing. It's unbelievable. It's like a return to the original Star Wars where there's not a lot of CGI. What you see when they're in the planes is aerial choreography. They had an aerial person who made that choreography, right?
That's wild.
It's insane. It's intense. They use real planes, right? The music is incredible.
It's so good.
And I'm like, the movie hasn't even started yet, and the first one is okay.
Yeah. It's like watching The Dark Knight or something, or Lord of the Rings, or the music makes half the movie. You're just like, this is insane.
I cry, I laugh, and I heard a lot of stories from on set that they were like, oh, geez, they filmed that for 18 months.
That's so crazy.
A certain actor didn't like the way he looked, so they reshot a bunch of it. They didn't have a lot of the story as they made that film. So they were just doing airplane shots at the beginning. And like, we don't know that,
No,
but
you just see the polished product at the end.
yeah, yep,
Wow, so
yep.
cool. Last question about acting, and then we can move on to
It's okay.
Southwestern stuff.
It's all right.
Um, what are some basic, like, if I was to tell you, you know, 30 demos,
Yep,
use your approach,
yep.
basics of acting when
Yep.
you go. I've never been to an acting class, but I'm always
Okay.
curious what's like the first thing you would learn, or what they do. And then what are some advanced sales that you're like the most recent thing that you learned, that like kind of like the last Sunday meeting when you get that one gold nugget that you're like, ooh, I hadn't tried the intro
Sure.
this way, like
Okay.
that
So,
you just most recently learned.
yep. So acting wise, typically, and it's very, it's good. It's good moans is to know what you want in a scene, right? And make sure what you want is directly related to the other person. Okay. And so what I want from this podcast is I want you to get off the podcast and say, this was the best interview we've ever had. And in the back of my mind, what I'm thinking is they've had legends from Southwestern, right? They've had some people that have really shared some not so great stories from Southwestern. That's what people actually want to tune into, right? They don't want to tune in to listen to me talking about acting, but I'm in the scene right now for the next hour or so, or a couple hours with Andres, and I need him to love me. Okay. And so how do I do that? And that is the bones of any great acting scene. Have an objective of what you want from the other person and have a tactic. Okay. It's just like the Bookfield. You want to sell, right? And have a couple of different closing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of the different closes. So that's basic acting 101. Probably where I'm at now was something from grad school that I still can't quite hang on to. Is David Costabile was my my clown teacher. And do you watch Billions at all?
I've seen like the first episode, and that's it.
You watch Suits?
Yes.
Okay, so he was on Suits. He plays Wags on Billions. He plays like Axe's assistant, kind of curly haired. And anyways, you'll know him if it's on Suits. So he was my clown teacher, and he was also on Breaking Bad.
Yeah, he plays the
Gabe.
chemist.
Yeah, the chemist. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He does. He's Dana Hardman on Suits.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. He was your clown coach.
Yeah, he was not a clown teacher. I mean, he was a professor there, and he was doing Breaking Bad while he was teaching. This happens a lot in acting study. It's like not what happens on the book field, because you can't kind of be on the book field and kind of not. But in acting teaching, you'll have somebody that's a professional who is also a teacher come in. Okay?
He's great.
Dude, he's amazing. And so
he's like good at his job.
Oh, he's phenomenal. He is very, very good. And he went to NYU. So he went to the same graduate acting. So NYU, there's undergrad, which is just a sea of undergraduates. And then there's grad acting, which takes 16 a year out of a application of 2,000, 3,000. So David Costabile comes in and he teaches us something called Assume Your Brilliance. All right. And this is something that I think everyone could use more in their life. I kind of use it for some of the kids that we coach is assume your brilliance. Is whatever you propose in a scene or in life, you go all out and then you don't apologize for it, right? And it's very difficult. So instead of just you and I acting here, man to man, what happens if the scene goes sideways? How do we keep rolling with that? Not improv wise, but how do we keep rolling with that and fill the scene, right? How do you actually unlock parts of your spirit and your mind and your gut and your body that you didn't know existed? It's even like neuroplasticity, right? We have not even graced the surface of the potential of the brain. In acting, the idea of assume your brilliance is you haven't grace the surface of what's possible for you. You see some great acting and you'll know it when you're in person. You'll be like, how did he do that? And sometimes it's almost like, I don't know. It's like if you have, 1,000 unit day on the Bookfield. You're like, I don't know how I did it. I can't explain it.
Wow.
So you learn that stuff in clowning, and that's really the key for me. That's the stuff that makes me cry. That's the stuff that makes me moved. That's the stuff that I want to tune into over and over, because I haven't solved that algorithm yet. And I'm not quite sure that anyone can. When you see that live performance or you hear that live music, you're like, how did you do it? Well, I practiced a lot, but then when you get in the moment, there's magic that happens. Something takes over.
The flow.
Yeah, it's the flow.
Some people can just get, like Tim Ritzer can just get in the flow. Speaking of, to circle back.
Yes, he can get. He's always in the flow. He doesn't have to get in the flow.
He is the flow.
He is the flow. Tim Ritzer.
You could be like, he should be a verb. You're Tim Ritzering right now, which means you're like, it's like going Super Saiyan. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, you just Ritzered. Did you see him Ritzer?
Total Ritzer move. TRM. Total Ritzer move.
We've also lost everyone because they're tuning in for book stories.
No, man, this is all good. We have people listening all the way through. There's people who are loyal, plus, or they skip forward, so it doesn't matter. Last question. Okay,
cool. Yeah.
When to you, who's the most talented actor or actress that you, in your opinion, based on this? Obviously, like you said, it's subjective. Some people love DiCaprio, some people hate DiCaprio, but based on what you know, who would you say, man, this or a particular performance from that actor that you're like, that was the Heath Ledger and the Joker. That was it, or whatever.
Sure. So Robin Williams was mine for a very, very, very long time. And Robin Williams got kicked out of Juilliard, right? So Juilliard, NYU, kind of same deal. And he didn't get kicked out. They told him, hey, we can't help you here, because his brain worked very different. Okay. It just worked on hyperspeed. Okay. But now today, I'm a huge fan of Cillian Murphy.
Yes.
Like I'll watch anything that he's in.
Dude.
Cillian Murphy.
I just watched Oppenheimer, which we all did, I feel like. But after watching Peaky Blinders, I'm like, this guy is bananas.
Yep. I'm a huge Tom Hardy fan, right? So I love Tom Hardy.
Peaky Blinders.
Yep. And then there's two theater actors who I will watch in anything. One is John Douglas Thompson, and one is Mark Rylance. And they embody what I would hope to be someday as an actor. If there was somebody that was 10, 20 years younger than me that came and saw it, I was like, I would hope you got to watch Andrew. I hope the performances would be how I feel about John Douglas Thompson and Mark Rylance. Yep.
I see what you're saying. As a stand-up fan, I have a soft spot for Robin Williams, but I get what you're saying. When you say Cillian Murphy, I'm like, yeah, he's just too damn good.
So good. It's so. Like, do you understand that it's so hard to be that simple? I also love Michael Shannon, but Michael Shannon is very interesting because he's on a lot of interviews and he'll say, "Hey, he loves the story, he serves the story," but he's like, he'll be like, "How did you get?" Because he was a big theater guy. He's like, "How did you get a career in film and television?" He's like, "Oh, bone structure."
Yeah, his chin.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, that's so refreshing. He looks amazing. You put some downlight on him, give him an angry role, and everyone wants to watch Michael Shannon.
Yeah. Yeah, I understand what you say. My dad always said about soccer, but I think this is true about everything, which back to bring it full circle before we move on to Southwestern, to bring it back to Magnus Carlsen and Lionel Messi and Cillian Murphy, right? I'm not saying Cillian is the Messi of acting, but the point is that my dad always said, when you're good at something, when you're really good at something, people can tell. Mm-hmm. But then when you're exceptional at something, people think that they can do it.
Yep.
Because you make it look so simple and so easy that people just go, oh, I could do that. And then they go and try, and then they go, oh, I can't do that. I can't. I could never. I mean, I'm not saying that people can't become what they want to become, and neuroplasticity is a thing, but generally speaking, for you to reach something like that is gargantuan.
It's why it's hard on the Bookfield for some of the most top producers to recruit and train huge teams.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. You know, Mickey Mantle has an interview as well where people ask, Mickey Mantle drank way too much, but he has an interview. He's like, people ask me how I can hit a baseball and I can't explain it to them. just comes naturally to
Yeah,
me.
it's like that subconscious competence is what that's
Yeah.
called, right? Right, that concept of conscious competence, blah blah blah. But some
Yeah.
people just go, it's like that. You've seen King Arthur, the
Yes.
movie, and
Yeah.
there's a scene where Tristan's hitting, they're like doing
Yeah.
a like aiming practice, they're all drinking, just whatever. He's shooting
Yeah.
arrows, and he hits the arrow in the bullseye, and then he hits the arrow that hit the bullseye. He hits, and you know
Yep.
what I'm saying?
Yep.
And they were like, "How do you do that?" He goes, "I just aim for the middle."
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, I know, but how? And it's the
Yes.
same idea. It's like, I don't know. I just kick the ball, or I just say the lines, or I just whatever. But it just comes off so easy that you're like,
It was I listened to the Lee McCroskey episode where he's talking about Kaya. He's like, oh, we got advanced sales techniques. And Kaya comes up and's like, I just worked hard and I knocked on a lot of doors and
yeah,
it worked out for me.
yeah. And you're like, yeah, but
But
it's not that simple.
we've got a lot of people. We've got thousands of people working hard and knocking on doors, and they're
Yeah,
not getting the same results
yeah,
at all.
exactly. So it's the same thing when you say Killian Murphy. Do you understand how it is to be that simple? It's like, yeah, it's insane. It's insane.
Yep. Yeah.
People are like, oh, I can do it. No.
So hard. Yeah.
Go try. Speaking of the Southwestern stuff, all right, so let's change gears. Oh man, this is fun. I'm having a blast.
So yeah,
Appreciate you.
I'll come on. I listen. So my three boys are the pride and joy of my life. But when you were about to ask me what my favorite movie was, I was about to say Storks because my mind automatically went to kids' movies, and that movie is amazing. And that movie will make you laugh and cry, and I know it all. And, and then I thought, oh my gosh, I only talk to kids. So Andreas, just if you want to go till midnight tonight, I'm with you because I'm talking to an adult that's not my wife.
Oh my god. About books. I'll tell you when I got arrested. Okay. No, okay,
Sure.
so let's start at the beginning. Roll the clocks
Mm-hmm.
back. We're sitting in 2003
Mm-hmm.
in Minnesota,
Yep.
Twin Cities. You're sitting at UM, and what
So
happened? How the hell did you
yes.
get into this thing?
So here's what happens. I get into a acting program, and maybe it's probably to a fault of mine now, and it's something that I get to work on in the second third of my life. Here is I'm thinking about money, and I know I'm going to graduate, but there's no job prospects. Even if I get the best job out of undergrad, it's going to be $250 a week, right? A week. And people are going to be like, you're an amazing actor. So I was like, oh, so I better figure out how to pay my way through college. My parents helped out a little bit, but we had some skin in the game. And my brother, and maybe he'll listen to this, he's my best buddy, I won't say anything that I don't need to say, was going to go out to the Bookfield, and he was going to go out to the Bookfield with, I was like, well, what's the Bookfield? And he talked about this selling books door to door, and he introduced me to somebody named Brooke Arts. And Brooke, you're awesome. I love you. Was about a 5'2" cheerleader at the University of Minnesota who had just sold 5,000, 6,000 units in her first summer.
Oh, so she's one of those.
Yeah. And I thought, oh, she's not a salesman, but she just made a lot of money. And so I asked her, or I asked my brother, I was like, hey, can you introduce me to Brooke? Because he's 2 years older than me. And my brother ended up not going out to the Bookfield. Anyways, he didn't go out to the Bookfield.
Come on, other Hovelson. What are you doing?
Well, what he is he's an incredibly successful and genius biostatistician, which leads me to believe that you can be successful without selling books. Oh, God.
Wow.
So Brooke likes me because Brooke is like, wow, this kid is, I don't know. He's like different. He's not going to be a salesman or a sales career. And I'm just like, Brooke, make me a machine. That's what I said to her. I'll never forget this. I said, just make me a machine. I'll do whatever for a summer. I got 3 months. I'll do whatever. Okay.
Yeah, you can do anything for 3 months.
And so it was pretty early on into my freshman year that I was like, nah, I think I know what I'm going to do. it tracks back to when I was a sophomore or freshman in high school. I was sitting on my stairs and I was like, listen, Lewiston, Minnesota is small, and I want to have a different summer experience every year until it's not really, it doesn't make sense anymore. I was like, this is a perfect summer experience. So I didn't even, I kind of got recruited, but it was more like, I want to make money. And then
You're a pony.
yeah, exactly. And then we start talking about all this, stuff. I go to all the meetings. I memorize everything before we get to sales school, and I get out there to sales school, and I think my first week I sold 30 units, 30. And I'm like, wait, I have it all together. And I was just trained by Brooke Arts, who's now legendary in JYD. And then I look at my roommate, and I was like, I was supposed to be the big dog. And my roommate, who I love to death, did not sell many units. And he was probably on his third or fourth summer. I don't remember what summer. And he's like, well, do your approach for me. And I was like, okay, I'll do my approach for you because I'm better than you. I already know how to sell more books.
Classic.
Yeah, classic. And he goes, dude, nobody can understand what you're saying. Go low and slow. And so then my second week on the Bookfield, I had like 30 sit downs every single day. I hit Breakfast at Champions.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, yeah, but now, thanks for the advice, roommate. And then I probably tanked in my third week. And then I just realized I went to follow Brooke again. And I thought, well, how she does it is she just smiles and runs like super fast. I was on a bike. And so what I locked into was just work harder than everyone else and ask for the sale. And we can get into that. But it worked out my first summer, it also created extreme amounts of stress and anxiety because I was like, I get this. I'll just knock on more doors than anyone else, and I'll just keep asking if they want to buy books. I'll just ask if they want to buy. And I never really, I had that part down, but I already had that part down from milking cows. Like I was already a hard worker. So I just transferred that to the Bookfield, if that makes sense.
Yeah, the work ethic itself.
Yeah, the work ethic itself wasn't new to me. But I made some cash. And then from there, I always wondered how I could do those numbers that other people were doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because in JYD, we crushed everyone in work stats. Everyone during my 2 summers. It was not even remotely close. Demos, calls, sit downs, hours worked. It was like we were just obliterating everyone. But we never had somebody go 10,000 units. We never had somebody going 15,000 units.
At JYD at that point?
At that point. We were just workhorses.
And so, okay, because I have the
stats.
I have the sheets of like what you sent of like stories. So I want to get into some of these.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first of all, I had a couple questions before we get into this. How did your parents feel? Like your parents,
my brother had already.
Yeah,
I can't remember. I think my brother had already tried to go sell books, and then he didn't go, and then he was trying to go again for the next summer with me, and then he didn't go. Brooke comes, they do like the parent thing, and they had already met Brooke, and I was going to acting school, and my mom was like, yeah, well, what's happening? And my dad looks at me, and I just always respected both of my parents. And my dad goes, well, AC, because my middle name's Christian, Andrew Christian. Well, AC, you might not make any money at this. And I was like, yep. And he's like, okay, go for it.
Wow.
And that was
That's
it.
Cool.
And that's all, it's the similar version of Ritzer saying, hey, we want to be your biggest supporter in your next career. That's all I needed to hear from my parents. And then I told them, but I did have to tell my parents, who are amazing. I had to tell them, please don't let me come home. Don't ask me if you want me to come home, because I already know you want me to come home. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to come home, even if it gets too hard. I'm just not going to do it. So it's going to be a useless call on Sunday if we talk about that part of it.
About going home.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Okay, so now I have some questions to ask you about this experience, because you wrote some stuff down. I'm excited.
Yes, here we go. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay. So, number one, this says 4 HQs in the first 3 weeks.
Okay. So this is my second. So this is my second summer. So literally, I know that I'm not going to be a bookman for 15, 20 years. I recruit my neighbor from Lewiston, whose dad was my drama director in high school. So it all goes back to, and then I recruit 2 kids in my acting program. Nobody's going to sell books for the rest of their lives, and nobody wants a sales career. I bring out a bunch of misfits, and I tell their parents, hey, we got it. You know what? I did really well my first summer. And so the 2 guys that I recruited, I'm like, oh man, we really need to find a home. We don't have a home. We really actually don't have a home. And the first place we live is with this in Webster Groves, where Whitney's from. Whitney Armstrong's from.
In Iowa?
No, in St. Louis.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So Webster Groves, and we live with this.
Sorry, I just always associated Whitney with Iowa because she went to Iowa when I knew her from selling books. So I'm like, what? Okay, yeah. Sorry, Whitney.
We live with this pastor, and we live upstairs, and I think we're on air mattresses. Everybody's got a story, but there's no shower. There's like there's like a handle that you bathe yourself with, in the Turkish baths or something. And so we go, and I'm taking stat calls, and we hear from downstairs, and a vacuum running every single night. This is no joke. Every single night we hear vacuum. And I'm just like, guys, hey, we're all good. Just go to bed. We're all good. Everyone's good. Go to bed. So I'm on stat calls. I didn't even take stat calls. I don't know. I'm on a call. Whatever. It doesn't matter. And one of the guys I bring out to the Bookfield is like, hey, Andrew, we can't stay here tomorrow night. And this is like in the middle of the week. I'm like, what do you mean? It's like, well, pastor told us that his wife didn't want us here. We had never met his wife. We had met the pastor once. And I was like, okay, well, pack up your stuff. We'll put it in my car and we'll head out on the Bookfield tomorrow. And I still don't know who his wife was. I still don't know who that moaning woman was, but I know she vacuumed every single night. And she just went, and we had no shower.
Can't take cold showers. We
could. No, we like maybe take a cold sponge bath with a shower head. And then these guys, because I asked my team, I asked my buddies, hey, send me some stories. They remember it better than next 2. I think the pastor felt so bad. He was like, you can have a room in our church for a while. And so then we slept on like a Sunday school floor in the church.
Nice.
And then we went somewhere else. And then finally, I was just like, I just said, I think I called my leaders and I was like, guys, can we, because I was hitting some decent numbers. One of these guys was hitting some decent numbers. I was like, can we just get a place to live? I don't care if we have to, drive 2 hours every morning. And we found a place to live with about an hour away from our HQ, and it was awesome. And we moved in with a guy named Josh Grossman, and we all kind of moved in together. And we all had really, really, really good summers. But the HQs it was bananas. It was crazy because they were my friends, and nobody was going to sell books. So it wasn't like we are going to crush this because we are going to crush Southwestern. They were like, this is insane.
Yeah,
The
it is.
lady's moaning. The lady's moaning downstairs. The lady's moaning. And
To what
she's
we hope is
moaning.
a vacuum cleaner.
Yes, and
Or we're
vacuuming.
assuming is, well, could be all sorts of different things.
Yes.
But we're hoping it was vacuum cleaner.
I was insane. It was insane.
Dude, first of all, there might be people listening who are friends of yours who did not sell books, and they're like,
Sure.
"You're telling me this company didn't give you guys a place to live when you went and sold to a different part of the country?" The answer is no.
No.
No, they did not.
Yeah, but you know what? Nobody else gave me a place to live when I came to New York, and I found
And then
Angelo
we found it,
Legatti.
baby. Let's go,
Yes.
dude. I guess you haven't heard about me. That's what you say.
Yep.
Nailed it. Oh man. Okay. Next up on this list, I have a blue light special. It sounds like you had.
Yeah, so I had many blue light specials because I was a very hard closer and I would knock till obscene hours. Because remember, for me, books were like summer camp. I was like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'll just keep knocking until they arrest me. Like, it's not that big of a deal for me. What am I going to do? Send me back to Lewiston? They're not going to do that. But we were knocking for HQs probably at like week 4 when we should be selling books. My second summer.
Shit.
Yeah, we did not have one at that point. So I was like, hey guys, so here's the deal, Jonathan and Stanton. 2 days out of the week, you're not going to be selling. We're going to be finding HQs. And one of those two was not so great at approaches. And it was probably pretty awkward and creepy. And, had to sit in the back, got a few calls and got a blue light special for him. And then all of a sudden for all of us, like that, like within like 10 minutes. And we're like, oh, geez, I thought I'd been approaching asking to live at your house very well. I thought, why would anyone send the cops on me? I'm smiling. Yes.
Is it?
Yes. And so anyways, we had to sign up for a court date, and then the real, the court date. And, nobody's coming to save you on the Bookfield. I've got 3 actors and a guy who's going to go be one of the best golf course designers in the world eventually out there selling books. And, and we have a court date. And so the guy who was actually the best at selling books on my team was a guy named Stanton Nash. And Stan's an avid listener, so he'll appreciate this. He was talented. He was like Mickey Mantle or whatever, he just kind of got it. And he was very good.
One of those guys.
So he started he would, during gravy time, sit down with families over dinner. Didn't matter if it was more than 20 minutes. He would always sell them books at the end. And of course, the story goes, he sits down with the family and I'm taking he's telling me his stat calls every night. I'm like, oh, I don't sit down with families. You don't have dinner with families unless it's Saturday night. He's like, what? They're buying. And then
I have 100 units already.
Yeah, he's like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?
Catch up, bro.
Yeah, that's exactly what, if I was a better manager, he probably would have had 10,000 units that summer. Well, or as a first year, 5 to 7. Absolutely. There's no question asked about that. So he sits down with a family and it's a cop. And he's like, we have a court date in like 3 weeks and we all might go to jail. And the cop's like, oh, just let me make some phone calls. And so, but I'm telling Stan, you cannot go back there and talk to anyone because there is no suicide calls. You cannot build relationships out in the Bookfield. This is transactional. You knock and then you go to the next house. And we all show up for the court date and they're like, it's dismissed. And I just looked at Stan and I was like, man, I've missed the boat on all this.
Yeah, something I'm missing here.
Yeah, there's something I'm missing here. Because we were supposed to go to jail, and then we were supposed to tell everyone how we were going to jail. So, anyways, that's the story of that. Yeah, I had so many. But I will never. Oh, I didn't put this in the notes. I will never, ever, ever forget this. I didn't like all the breakfast stuff. I didn't like all the breakfast stuff. I didn't like filling out all the order pads. It didn't make sense to me. It didn't help me buy into having a better day on the Bookfield. Okay.
Well, and hold on, we should probably explain this.
Yeah,
there's some kids that don't even do paper orders anymore, so this is like a new concept for them. They might still do it with like whatever receipts they're supposed to leave behind, but I doubt it.
Okay.
But so long story short, the idea was that you prepped to have a good day,
Hmm.
and so you were able to raise the expectations because you had order pads that you have to order for the company that you would fill out the order form on, like with pen and paper,
Yep.
physical. Now they do it with iPads. It used to be like you would write it down what they wanted, and then you would ship those to the company, and then that's how they knew how you were doing. Like
Right. Yes.
that's how they took the orders. And so the idea was that at the beginning of each day and during breakfast, you would fill out um like 10 order pads that you,
Hmm.
if you didn't close all 10 customers, whatever you didn't sell, so you had 8 of them, 2 of those you'd have to scrap, throw away, and then start from scratch,
Hmm.
with a blank slate. The idea behind that is, was the quote, it was like it's more expensive, and you would burn through order pads way faster, so you had to
Yeah.
pay for more and the company had to send you some more. So
Sure.
the idea was it costs more to have lower expectations than high expectations, so it's better to
Yep.
just order pads and
Yep.
burn through them than to run the risk of having low
Right.
expectations. But you're
Right.
saying that you didn't buy into the
Yeah. I didn't. I
mentality of
did.
filling it out 10,
I
because you
didn't buy.
actually got 2 customers a day usually is what.
Yeah. But you know, because I sold some books. I didn't sell a ton, but I sold some. You know,
Mhm.
I would love when I would fill out 10 and then have to fill out 11, 12, and
Oh,
13.
oh yeah.
That was
The
like
minute where
amazing.
you open your order pad and it was the next
Yeah.
blank one letting you know that you had 11
Yeah.
customers that day was solid.
So
Yeah.
for me, what if I didn't sign? What if I didn't fill any of them out? And the first one, I was like, "Ooh, this is exciting! Look, I'm signing someone up. How I could break my belief barrier right away at 7:59 in the morning." So, anyways,
Yes.
make a long story longer. I think breakfast were not my favorite point. It was a high stress and anxiety time for me. It was how you should set your day and be like almost perfect, right? You should know how this is all going to go. And my first summer, we were around a lot of great booksellers, and my one of my I'll stop there. The story goes is that I go to the first house and I have to pee so unbelievably bad, like unbelievably bad. I'm just doing the potty dance like my 4-year-old does the potty dance. Like we're about to either pee in our pants, right, um, or pee on Mrs. Jones's front porch, right? Or pee inside her house if she lets me in, because that would be terrible. I did not want to sit down. And I was very tired. I was exceptionally tired because I did not sleep super well in the Bookfield. So I go, you know what, Mrs. Jones? And she's like, no, I don't want it. I was like, great, awesome. Can I get a Diet Coke and a bunch of pens? And she was like, what? I was like, yep, just a Diet Coke and then a bunch of pens because I'm selling books. And I could tell something was wrong. But at 10 o'clock that night, 10:30 maybe, even I'm still dialing at 10:30, I go up to a house that no lights are on, nobody's there.
Aye.
I nobody's there, but they told me to just keep knocking, that every answer was behind the next door. I knock, and then I kind of shuffle back to my car, and of course, blue light special. And the dude
Boom.
is like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm knocking." They're like, "You asked some lady to go pee in her house at 1 minute to 8 this morning for a Diet Coke and a bunch of pens. What's happened? And you just knocked on that door where nobody's home. What are you doing?" And I was like, "I don't know. I'm just working really, really hard. I'll go home." So I never went to jail, but I was like, "Oh, this is how this happens. This is
This
how
is
this
how
happens."
people think we steal children.
Yeah, yeah. I was like, "I'm a really nice guy. I'll tell you exactly what I'm doing. I, I'm a brainless door knocker."
Oh man, how times
There
have
were a lot
changed.
of non-brainless door knockers out
You would have
there.
been on a Facebook group if you had sold 10 years
Yep.
later. You would have
Yep.
been destroyed by some mom
Mhm.
in her keyboard.
Mhm.
Oh man.
Mhm.
Okay. I have in here you started a company called Hungry for Problems. What's this?
Well, we were in really ritzy municipalities, um, not really ritzy, just kind of bigger brick, like middle to big brick, that were very protective of their HOAs, and we could not knock without a license, and so we all go down and we have to. Well, I tell this about Stanton too because he'll love this. we had to go make up a name for our company in order to get a solicitation license to knock in Webster Groves and Kirkwood and all these kind of bigger brick. What should we name the company? Hungry for Problems, right? It's Hungry for Problems. And every morning, Stanton, I'm laughing because I know Stanton is going to listen to this. Stanton is the worst eater of all time. He would have eggs every morning and he doesn't shut his mouth when he doesn't. And so he's like, hungry for problems. We're hungry for problems. Stan married me and my wife, and he's like my best friend. And he's like, I'm still hungry for problems. And so it still haunts me to this day. Hungry for Problems was just eggs falling out as he goes and sells more books or equal amount of books that I am selling, and he's not. But we have this, so we have this Hungry for Problems. He gets pulled over, red light special, and some cop heard about it, and he goes, "What sort of problems are you looking for?" It's a good story. None of us knew how to answer it.
You're one of them right now.
Yeah, you're one. Yes, exactly.
I'm starving, and you're in my face right now.
Yes. Yeah. So that's that story.
That's hilarious, man. You just didn't use Southwestern. You just created a Hungry for Problems company. That's good.
That's awesome. We were just like hungry for problems because this was the summer where we still didn't have a place to live. It was like, oh yeah, remember 3 weeks our OJT? I was like, we were OJTing the whole summer because we couldn't. The three dudes had no place to live.
That takes a long time.
It was a long time.
I mean, just kind of like you kind of alluded to this earlier, but just the callback when you were talking about the kids that you guys help, where once the kids was able to have stable housing, then all of a sudden their GPA went up. It's the same thing in the summer, where it's like if you have a solid HQ, that goes a long way to having a good summer. Doesn't mean you're gonna have a great summer. Doesn't mean you're gonna sell a lot of books. But not having my third summer or my fourth summer, we didn't have an HQ until my fifth week. Same idea. We were just like kind of hopping around. And my third summer actually, and both of those were the worst summers I had. A lot of it because I was off schedule. But if you show up and it's like your HQ is boss, it's a lot easier to stay on.
Can I talk about off schedule? Can I talk about off schedule for a little bit?
Yeah,
please. Okay.
Sure.
So I will be the first to say that I didn't learn some of these lessons because that you learn on the Bookfield. I didn't learn it through the framework of the Bookfield because I didn't sell for a number of summers. Like I never got off schedule. My people never got off schedule. JYD didn't really get off schedule. I wasn't like around long enough to have a summer where I felt that, right? I just knew that if I got off schedule, I was a failure of a human being. Of course. Okay. And I'll never forget my second summer, there's this guy, Matt Meredith, who was selling in the education division. And he's like, yeah, I hit Mort this week. Actually, he was Southern. So I hit Mort this week, Andrew. I was like, oh, amazing. How do you do it? He's like, well, I hit it on Thursday and then I went to the beach.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, this dude is hitting $1,000 units and going to the beach. And I'm stressing at 10 o'clock at night on Saturday in order to hit it. So now, Dan Moore said something fantastic in his episode, right? He said, hey, this is the way this thing works, is that everybody goes and works 80 hours. That's the way this thing works. That's the structure of how this works. And we had to right the ship and get people on the bus that were down for that, right? Your brother being one of them.
Yeah.
But when I sold and I learned these stories of people hitting gigantic numbers and not being on schedule, it was the first, everyone just go beyond schedule, I guess. That's the moral of the story. But it was the first thing of there is a different way to be successful. And I'm missing something.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe I'd go sell books now and I try to purposely be off schedule to like feel what that feels like. But it's still to this day has never sat with me, right? That when I built a number of different companies, my education companies, I do tell people, I like, get on schedule. I was like, of course you're not getting the results. You're not getting the results because you're not putting in the time that other people that are getting the results are getting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there's people that are like, well, I can do that in half the time. And that's the assume your brilliance of graduate acting. They assume their brilliance and they're just like, no, this is how I'm going to do it. And I'm going to do it in half the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, okay, there's probably more than just two, but I would say there's two general sides of this coin. So
Great.
right,
Love
so
it.
it,
Do
it-
it.
on the one side, so there's no doubt that in order for you to succeed in anything, you have to
Hmm.
put in the effort to get good at it. Like
Sure.
there's talent involved, right?
Yep.
We talked about people like Killian Murphy and Messi that they're talent, but as we
Absolutely.
all know, the old cliche, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't want to work hard.
Absolutely.
However, it's hard to beat talent if talent works pretty hard,
Okay. Yes. If
right?
talent works. Yep.
Like you could have someone who is not talented and work really hard, and the best they'll ever be is not as good as a talented person that worked hard.
Hmm.
Not 90 hours a week every day, blah, blah. I'm talking about like they did put effort, right?
Yep.
However, in Southwestern specifically, right, you have to put in the time to get
You
good at
have
it.
to. You have to.
There's no like because what happens is we'll have first years listen to this and go, well, it looks like if I hit more, I can go to
No.
the
Yeah.
beach on Thursday. It's like, no, not
No.
you.
No.
The
No.
reason not you is because you're missing the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours and
Mhm.
hours and hours that this person who is now hitting more by Thursday is had to put in to get that skill, which is not the same thing as talent,
Exactly.
to acquire a skill, right? Skill is hard work and talent combined. And how much
Yeah.
of each you need to be at certain level of skill depends on how much talent you have, right? The
Yep.
lesser talent, the more work to get that skill. The more
Right.
talent, the less work to get that skill, right? And then
Yep.
it's sharpening after that. And that's how you get freaks and record breakers. But
Hmm.
the point is, this guy who got off schedule, he can do that because he hit more by Thursday. So people
Yeah.
may listen to this and go, "Oh, so you're telling
Sure.
me if I have high production, then I can now break the rules?" Yeah, because that means that for you to hit more by Thursday, what that really means is you put in those hours at some point somewhere for sure. Undoubtedly, you could not have
Hmm.
gotten to that level of skill without some sort of effort, really,
Hmm.
really concentrated for a long, long time.
Yep.
So all that to say is two sides of the same coin, right? There is something to working smarter. Like you just
Hmm.
said earlier, like I missed it. There's more than one way to be successful. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. Right. Um, what happens is that you have to, there's no cheating or shortcutting the principles,
No.
the basics.
You're absolutely right.
You can't
Yes.
cheat those.
You cannot cheat the principles.
Once you have those, you can cheat or bend the rules of the game to make
Hmm.
it in your favor and win. Right.
Hmm.
So whatever this guy was doing to hit more by Thursday,
Yeah.
and he
Well,
was, you know,
it's like
he
when,
did it.
right, we had our I don't even remember what they were called on Sundays when the top producers would come and you'd phone in, you'd do a
Yeah,
conference call. And I'll never forget this. Dustin Hillis
that was the
was,
summer he broke the record in '04
yeah,
when he was yeah.
yeah. Well, it was the summer before. So anyways, it doesn't matter. He he says, as I'm knocking it, because I know how to work hard. He gets on and he's like, I haven't cold called since week 2. I'm like, what do you mean? And they take him through like a 7-minute interview. He's like, I only work referrals.
Yeah.
He's like, I only talk to people who are friends of people that bought books. And it wasn't long enough. I was like, oh, that's fantastic. I don't have any referrals to call tomorrow. But it's those sort of, not even advanced, just basic level sales skills that the framework of knocking on doors, you have to know the framework first. You have to know how to win the game. You have to know the game you're playing
Yeah.
in order to know how to win it.
How to bend the rules to win it. Yeah,
Exactly.
that's the point. Like so, the best analogy is the Matrix.
Sure.
When you meet Neo, he's supposed to be the one, and that's why the movie's so crazy because you're like, wait, he's not the one, and then at the end he
Mm.
was the one. Oh shit,
Yeah.
right? But the reason that's the moral of the story, right? He has to go through all the training simulations, he has to go through all the programs, learn all the kung fu and all that shit, and
Yeah.
understand the framework of what the Matrix actually is, the rules of the game, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
so that when it's time to bend him and break him, he knows how he can do that. That's basically what lawyers do, essentially, right? Is they
Sure.
go and learn, like the best lawyers, what makes them good or law firms is they are really good at researching. They're really good at finding precedent. And so they
Mm-hmm.
go and know all the rules, literally, all the literal laws that they need to know for that specific kind of case so that they can go, well, this was an exception that was made at that point, and this is why it's an exception now. And that's really how court cases work. You know what I'm saying? It's just finding precedent, and then from there they can prove that because this
Sure.
happened, it was written so you know the rules, and then you can bend them. You can't just bend
Yep.
the rules without really knowing and mastering them.
Yeah.
It's that simple.
Absolutely.
Ah,
Absolutely.
it's good stuff. Now, I will say, I think I've always argued that the full experience of Southwestern is someone who was off schedule. Like my
Yeah.
first summer, top first year, 4,000 units, hit
Sure.
BC, blah, blah, blah. I did it not a single minute off schedule. Like I was on.
Yep.
My third
Yep.
summer, oh yeah, I was going to the movies,
Sure.
going to restaurants on a Wednesday night. It's all great,
Sure.
right? But that also was an experience in and of itself, right? It was a
Mm.
different way to go
Mm.
through selling books.
Hmm.
And I learned a lot about myself, as much probably, if not more, than I learned going and hitting the schedule in the sauce like I was supposed to. And I
Hmm.
learned from both of those experiences. People who never got off schedule, they don't know what that's like.
No, I had no idea what that. I should probably go off schedule. We had a guy in grad school and he's a phenomenal actor, and he's a huge voiceover actor. He's one of my best friends. The teachers actually told him, they're like, you need to skip class a little bit more because you're a little too intense. And there's probably a version of that with anything that needs to be done. You know?
And there is something to be said about, you said you were going to work as hard as you can and your word and all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
I get that, and I
Yeah.
did, and I told people I was going to work, and I wasn't, right? But there's something to unplugging like that and like looking at it from that perspective.
Well, look
Um,
at how Southwestern Consulting, and now we do it at the student coaching division, how we design a schedule for life outside of the Bookfield, right? So let's translate these principles to life. Students get burned out, entrepreneurs get burned out. What's the first thing that any good coach, not any good coach, what's the first thing that we say at Southwestern? Like, okay, where have you put in your joy into your schedule? Where do you have the fun stuff? This stuff that's meant for you. Where do you have the 2 hours of video games on a Saturday where you're not feeling guilty about what you have or haven't done?
that's the key right there. Keep going, but that's
Right.
key right there.
For me, it's very, very important. I went to my son's music concert on Wednesday. That's real. That is a skill that has been incredibly hard for me to develop, is to put in the middle of a Wednesday, F off and go have fun. Like,
Yeah.
and then, here, even a Ponytails podcast.
Yeah.
Right. This is enjoyable for me. But normally I'm like, oh, well, I'm not calling people. I'm not coaching anyone. I'm a failure. And I'm not saying that Southwestern instilled that in me. I think that humans in general, you have to know the framework of the game that you're playing. You have to develop the skills to play that at its very highest level. Right. And then the next step is falling in love with the fundamentals of creating joy in there. Right. You look at any top athlete, right? Stephen Curry. Okay. He asks to go play golf. And the reason he asks to go play golf is because he's a phenomenal shooter and he's a phenomenal basketball player. But he forgets to schedule in how to turn his brain off.
Yeah.
Right. You look at, you've seen The Last Dance with Michael, the Bulls.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Phil Jackson's a Yoda because he sends Rodman to Vegas. And then Rodman comes and he's a monster.
Yeah, he's crazy.
He's
because he understands Rodman's Rodman.
Exactly.
Which is, from a coaching standpoint, that's the key.
Yeah, exactly.
And he knew Jordan was Jordan.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the great experiment.
Beautiful.
Of life.
And that's beautiful. I think what you said there, the most important thing that you said there was not guilty. Oftentimes, either on the air or probably more often off the air, when I talk to people who had just recently got done selling books. So we're talking about, like, I had someone on the show who sold in 22 or 23, that literally just got done this year or whatever, right? And I tell them, just wait until next year when you're sitting at a pool on a Tuesday in July. And especially people who sell a lot of summers, like the 8th summer, that it's finally the first summer that they haven't sold books since they were 18. And they feel this guilt.
Yeah.
Because I should be, I know I felt it, where I was like, I should be selling, I should be on a house right now. Like, and that says a lot about the pressure of not being off schedule, which, and it can be healthy in a lot of ways, but then it's like, you gotta be okay to not feel guilty because you're watching a movie
Yeah.
or because you're at your kid's music
Yeah.
concert or whatever. You
Because
have to let
you
go of that.
have to save room for the magic. You have to save room for the magic. One of my best friends here never sell books. He's a photographer. He's photographed Lenny Kravitz, LeBron James, Usain Bolt,
Wow.
all of these guys. And I'm like, man, you're so joyful every single day. And he's joyful every single day, and he does what he wants. So he's not Ron Alford. Ron, hello. I'm like a super fan of Ron, right? I idolize Ron. Ron comes on and he's like, you gotta go through the suck at least once a year,
Yeah.
right?
You said that.
Yeah. And I love it. I
Great
love it.
episode.
Yeah, it's an amazing episode. My brother-in-law is an ultra marathoner, right? And so I get it. But this friend who's a photographer is like, why would I do that? I wake up every morning and say, what sort of magic does the universe have for me today?
Yeah.
And I'm like, dang, son, I didn't even know that I could ask myself that question.
It's brilliant. Well, and we were just talking to Alicia Huck and I was talking to RJ Lowry. Both of them have the same philosophy where like, and I adopted this. It helped me a ton. And I'm not saying that that's another thing. It's not the same for everybody. Some people are Jordan, some people are Rodman. And this
Sure.
just right. Some people are Ritzer and some people are just not, right?
Yep.
Right. That's just how it. And first of all, knowing yourself, which is another thing about the Matrix, is like if you know which one of those you are or what kind of person, then you should probably be the shit out of that, and
Yeah.
go for it. But RJ Lowry was talking about this, and from books we got this concept of wake up at 5:59 and get your morning routine, and like by 7 you already had the game. And for some people that's phenomenal. And I try to do that, and I started realizing I'm miserable when I do that. I don't look forward to my day because I know that I have to go through this. So instead, I don't. And so Alicia and RJ both started telling or sharing this concept of like, my day starts at like 10 and I don't wake up until like 8 a.m. And even just listening to that from a Southwestern perspective, you're like, oh my God, you're wasting your day. Right. But no, because for them, let's just take whoever they wake up at the time they wake up. How do they wake up if you feel rested? Great. How easy is it to have a good attitude and take a cold shower if you're feeling great? I don't know, Now, I'm not saying that everybody should wake up at 10 a.m.
Yeah.
However, I am saying know that about yourself, right? I
Yeah.
always recognize that I was always up late and woke up late.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
like, a lot of my work, sometimes when I'm doing stuff here for the podcast, my wife will go to bed at 9 and I'll just like stay up and work on stuff, and that's when I'm being productive is at 9:30 because there's nothing else to do. But that
Yeah.
works for me. It doesn't mean it works for everybody. But the
Sure.
whole point of it is when you are working, if you have the capacity to be like, this is my work time, so I'm going to work the crap out of this, do it. However, when you're resting, you should also rest the crap out of the time that you have for resting. You know what I'm saying? Because you're like, if you're thinking about work when you're supposed to be on vacation, you're not on vacation. You're not giving your brain that time off. You're not playing golf, like
No. Right.
And that's huge. That's huge, man. Good
I'll
stuff.
I'll never forget, and then we can move on. Is
I want to hear quitting philosophy after this.
Yes. Okay. I tried to come back, not try to come back. I like just needed some cash, right? And I was acting, and I wasn't going to ever sell books, but I was like, at that point in my life, I was like, who are the richest people that I know? Who have done something with their life. I called an old sales manager and I was like, hey, what do you think about like me selling this summer? I'm not going to go live in an HQ and I'm not going to. And he was like, I'm open-minded. He's like, what if you sell from 10 to 3 and we set expectations of this many units for the summer and we get you some customers. And I was like, what? You could do that? And then I did I did hear the Dan Moore episode of like, that was probably the time where they didn't have such great results on the Bookfield because the way the Bookfield functions is you have to learn how to win that game. You have to learn how to play that game. You can't play football games are not 9 innings. They're 4 quarters. That's it. So you have to win the 4 quarters.
Yeah.
Anyways,
that's funny. My brother, when he got married, him and his wife were still selling, and they sat down with Dan Moore and asked him about like, because when you're married and you go sell, it's different. And so they weren't aware. They thought they were just going to go and sell. And so Dan was like, listen, here's what's going to happen. On Wednesday nights, you're going to stop knocking at 5 and then you're going to go on a date because your marriage
Wow.
is more important than the Bookfield. So you need to spend time
Jeez.
together. So Dan specifically instructed them on Wednesday nights and Saturday nights.
Wow.
They could change it for a Friday night and then work
Yeah.
through Saturday night, but like 2 nights a week they had to stop at 5, and by coachability and Dan's
Mm,
orders, you got to go have dinner, go
mm,
do a movie, do something together as a married couple. And my brother was like, you could do
mm.
that? And Dan's like, yeah, it's good for your marriage. But like, it was the same concept of like, it was the first time that the reality of like not working on a Wednesday night like hit him. And
Sure,
he's like,
sure, of
what?
course, of course.
It's kind of funny.
Good for them
Um,
and good for Southwestern.
I thought that was really cool. I was like,
Yeah,
all
good
right,
for books.
bravo on that.
Good for
Yeah.
books.
Okay, what is this? You told me to ask you about your philosophy or about quitting on the Bookfield. I need to know about
Okay, all right. So here's my philosophy about quitting on the Bookfield. I won't get. I love everyone at Southwestern Student Coaching and Southwestern. I think it's a good thing for some people. I think it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And there's I should have came prepared with this. There's a famous book about quitting for like knowing when to quit that a high level CEO and executive coach wrote, that the people need to know when to quit, because to be able to do the next best thing. Right. And founders and CEOs need to do this. Do you know this book?
Is
Have
it
you heard of
called
it?
Quit or the
Yeah,
thing?
I think it's just called Quit. It might
Annie
just be
Duke? The power
yeah,
of
Annie
knowing
Duke.
when to,
Yeah.
The power of knowing when to walk away.
Yes, exactly. Okay. And so my number one, if it's your first year, don't quit. Don't quit. If people are going to be like, Andrew Hovelson told me to quit, and he's a part of Southwestern, and he's coaching young people, and he says you know when to quit. But I was listening to the Lester Crafton episode. He's like, well, everyone quits. It's like, that's just not true in the real world. People decide that there's a better experience for them, right? I have a grad school professor for acting who is an unbelievable communications coach, has worked with some of the richest folks on the planet, Democrats, Republicans, as they craft their speeches. And he doesn't believe in the word suffering. He's like, no, because what happens is when you choose a different path, that's the path of least resistance for you. You choose the better path for you. And I don't think anybody should quit the Bookfield, but I do think, well, we all know that it doesn't make them a bad person if they didn't finish the summer.
Well,
right?
Most of us.
I mean, yeah, sure. But
You know who you are.
I should have, you know who you are. I'll never forget this guy who had sold like 3,600 units, 4,000 units, was training me in sales school. We were like together because we kind of jammed. We had a similar vibe. And then he never made it to the Bookfield. And I don't remember the guy's name. I was like, I think it was Nolan. I was like, hi, how's Nolan? He's like, oh, he went through sales school and then he literally got in his car and just drove home as everyone drove to their turf. And I was like, wow, he made a decision for himself. And if that decision is right for himself, freedom. If that decision is wrong for himself, he has, as people say, left some stuff out on the Bookfield, right? Quitting on the Bookfield, it was so long ago, and I know it's probably different now, is that this idea that we all have to do things for the rest of our lives that we hate in order to be successful, in order to learn the life lessons, in order to suck the juice out of life. I don't subscribe to at all. I do not subscribe to it. Now, however, I do subscribe to that you need a framework in which you can practice building those skills of being on schedule, habits, doing things when you don't want to do them. You need a framework in that, in which you can do that. But it might not be freaking boot camp selling books.
Amen.
Yeah.
It's interesting. It all kind of depends on how.
And it might, right? It also actually very well might be that.
Yeah, I mean, it might. It just
Yeah.
depends on how you do. Well, okay. So for the sake of this conversation, it
Hmm.
just and what based on like what Lester said and some of how because
Sure.
this is a hot topic actually within like especially leadership
Oh,
in
really?
Southwestern.
No, I didn't know
Um,
any of this.
not necessarily like a hot topic, but like what I mean by hot topic is a difference in opinions or philosophies. It's a more controversial philosophy, I guess,
Okay.
to have, or
Okay.
not yours per se particularly, but
Okay.
so for example, um, the, if you're an OL, like you're an org leader, you're in charge of a good 20 kids out in the summer. You're your fourth time manager. People depend on you, and you have
Mm.
that responsibility of
Sure.
making sure, just for the sake of the rest of the group, you are chosen as the leader. You have stepped up as leader,
Hmm.
and then you go home week 3 for no good
Yeah.
reason. That's fucked.
Yeah.
Like seriously,
Yes. No, it's
that's you
okay.
can't do that. Like that'll ruin
Yeah.
other people's summers that
Yeah.
would have not quit, right? Had they not been aware of you
Sure.
doing this. So
Absolutely.
there's some of that. Now,
That's
here's the
not
deal.
okay for the business, and that's not okay for
Yeah.
you as a leader. Yeah.
Because you said, "Hey, you're here. I'm here for 12 weeks." So
Hmm.
there's when quitting goes against your word, or the act of quitting is out of something selfish, even if it's something really tough that you have to go through.
Hmm.
And it's like you were saying, sometimes it's like that's the best choice for them, but it's like doesn't necessarily mean it's the best choice for the group. And you as the leader, you need to recognize that. Now, I'm not judging people who quit as OLs. No problem. That
Sure.
life
Sure.
is life, and it's this
Sure.
thing we did in college. So who cares? But
Right. Right. Right.
on the other hand, from what you're saying, it's like, hey, look, some people they get what they need from this. And I would argue that everyone got exactly what they needed out of this, even
Yes.
for people who had bad experiences
Hmm.
or for people who stayed for too long. Because
Hmm.
I was one of those people that stayed for too long, but I
Okay.
needed to know that for myself.
Sure.
Looking back now, I'm like, wow, that's what I look like when I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing
Ah.
when I was off schedule. See what I'm saying?
Hmm.
So like
Hmm.
I should have quit after my second summer. Should have. Who cares? I didn't. I stayed 2 more summers. And then now I go, oh, so next time that my life is miserable and I hate what I do for work and I don't want to do this and I'm lying to people about how much I'm working,
Hmm.
maybe that's a sign for me
Hmm.
to be like, stop doing what you're doing.
Huh.
So I
Yeah.
needed that for me, right? Like I don't know. It's hard. That's hard as this, but I agree with you. I agree with what you're saying. If people need to go, and we've had this conversation too before, but there's certain kids that come out to sales school or that come out to the Bookfield that we all know should not have come out.
Sure. Yep.
You know what I
Yep.
mean? And we're in the summer and the kid's struggling, and we all know that this person probably
Hmm.
shouldn't have came, but we came because it was another body to have because I needed a 5-person team so I could hit my goal about whatever which is
Yep.
an arbitrary goal that I set nobody
Sure.
cares about. you
Yes.
know like
Yes.
who cares, but we kept him out there because we needed that body to stay with that other first year who needed a roommate or
Hmm.
whatever, and that kid should have gone home, and we should have let them go home. We shouldn't even probably brought them out in the first place, but we did. We
Yep.
should have let them go home when they needed to, or not even. So I get it. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. And it probably comes to like some of the Southwestern student coaching stuff we do is we were state runners up in basketball my senior year. Okay. So, and I was quarterback of our high school football team. I got benched my senior year, but
Oh,
we were state quarterfinal. We were in the state quarterfinals. I should have never played basketball. I actually remember having a conversation with my dad at the bottom of our stairs. And I was like, Dad, I just don't, I like I wanted to, I want to quit. And he's like, you can do that, man. You're, a weekend. He's like, I'm not going to think less of you, you know, at all. If you go back there, you probably, owe it to your buddies to stick with. And I said, okay. And I went back and it was cool. I rode the bench the whole time. Looking back, I was pretty miserable because I knew I wanted to be an actor. I left like our section or subsection game to go audition for acting, right? Acting schools. And then I always ran track to get in shape for football. But what I really wanted to do was play baseball because that gave me joy. And I
mm,
remember wavering in my spring semester of my senior year. Why do I have to run track again? I was pretty good at track. I was like, I really just want to play baseball. And the baseball coach was the basketball coach. And I went in, and I'm not. This is hard because I'll probably get pinned as like, oh, Andrew's asking everyone to quit if they don't enjoy what they're doing,
No, yeah,
right?
I'm not
So
getting that from you, by the way.
okay,
That's not the
but
message I'm getting from you.
I remember so I went to track. We were doing a warm up, probably on the third 400. I just was like, F it. I stepped off the track. I walked into the locker room, and I walked into the baseball coach, and I was like, hey, coach. I was like, I want to play baseball. And he said, did you clear it with, the other coach? I was like, I didn't, but I want to play baseball. And he's like, okay. He's like, come to practice tomorrow, grab a glove. And it was probably the most fun that I've ever had. Right.
Yeah.
It was really probably the most fun that I have ever had.
Hmm.
And it was a big lesson for me that if this isn't your purpose, if this isn't your passion, and if you've gotten what you needed from the framework in which you are participating, right, which is athletics. I wasn't going to play athletics in high school. Then go do something that fills you up, right? I did not like when both of my sons decided not to play piano, right? I didn't like it because I didn't like quitting. But if I think that just getting white knuckling through something is the only thing that matters in life, we would have missed out on a lot of things. We would have missed out on Facebook, right? And now I just listened to Tim Ferriss' podcast. He's like, listen, everyone's saying, I'm going to be Zuckerberg. I'm going to be the whole thing, right? There are many more people that should just finish Harvard, right? But we have to allow that for young people to be an option, to not have to go to college to play hockey or field hockey, right? Or try an African-American studies, or try a Jesus in history class, right? Or go try modern dance for men. And you're not quitting on whatever else you're doing. You're actually playing in the sandbox of life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a thin line between commitment and following what drives you, what moves you.
Right. Because if you are in a place where your commitment turns to pressure that you believe you have no choice in whatever the situation is, you're now a prisoner. You don't have any choice. And it's not, I don't have any choice because I committed, because I'm going to just see it through to the end. It's like, I have no choice. Because if I go back against my word, I've failed. And
but it's hard to balance that with your work, right?
It's impossible. It's impossible. And it's why humans will continue on forever, because we will never have an answer to this question. We'll just have hypotheses and experiments.
Well, but what we can do is kind of, again, back, and I'm not trying to necessarily, people are like, oh, you're just plugging Southwestern stuff. No, if you just go back to what you guys are teaching kids, right? What Southwestern taught us, which is, it's not just about the 30 demos and the 80 hours a week. It's not about that. It's about the process of learning to set goals and hitting them, right? And even though if for example, again with your kid, it's like it's not teaching about your kid. It's not teaching your kid about not quitting piano. It's about teaching your kid how to communicate and successfully pursue playing music. And in this case, it was like, oh, it's not that your kid doesn't love playing music. That's what it feels like when he wants to quit piano, and that's why it sucks, because you're like, oh man, you're good at this, and no, it's not. It's just he doesn't like getting a human telling him what to do. At the piano, versus, oh, I can just go learn this on YouTube and still love this. Yeah, then do that.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
But what you don't want him to do is just sit on his phone and taking dumb junk and just sitting on the couch and not doing shit, and then not providing and giving to society. And in his case, he's providing to society by providing music, and that's beautiful, right? But there's a line.
Because here's a philosophy on life that I'm trying to prove or disprove right now, and I don't know whether it's right or wrong. But the quality of your life will be measured against the number of tough conversations that you can have. Okay. And if you can continually have tough conversations with yourself and other people, those tough conversations will be easier and easier, and they'll unlock the next level of the video game. That the next tough conversation that said, it doesn't have to be my son, but the next said person is I never want to play music ever again, which is like, I never want to knock on a door ever again.
Mm-hmm.
And that is terrifying for anyone to answer. And if you can answer that with resolve, with joy, with maybe a little bit of evidence because you've gone through, like, right, you persisted against something,
yeah,
your life is going to be pretty freaking good. It's going to be pretty good.
Yeah. And again, like you said, it just comes down to, by the way, I like that philosophy. My philosophy is I measure how good my life was depending on how many times someone's asked me to be their best man at their wedding.
Love it. I've been so many. How many you got?
Okay, so the first measure is how many times you've been asked to be in a wedding, but then the next measure is how many times of those were you the best man. I'm about to be the best man in my 8th wedding.
Oh, you win! Wow, phenomenal.
Crazy.
Are they all book guys and gals?
No, some of them were book guys, some of them were, not. But to me, I'm like, okay, that's pretty cool because that means that 8 people in life have been like, which I don't know if this is sad for them or good for me, but they're like, hey, you're the best person I know. I need you to come here. It's like, oh man, if this is what you got, this is the best you got. You got no better than me. But anyways, but I love that philosophy of like, because how do you measure a good life, right? And it's just like, how hard can you?
Here's what I failed to do on the Bookfield, and then we can move on from here. I failed to look at the Bookfield as a laboratory, as an experiment. My entire life, professional life for the most part, has been in a rehearsal room. Okay. For 3 to 5 weeks, there is zero expectation that you would ever get anything right or that you would be beholden to your choices. In fact, that is actually a fatal flaw. If you do not try something new the next day, you're probably not that great of an actor because you can't risk, because you're holding on to things way too tight.
You have your cool card. It's your cool card.
You're right. You have your cool card. You can't get rid of your cool card.
Yeah.
And I always, because my brother's a biostatistician. In the lab, it's the same thing. You don't create penicillin because you go out to create penicillin. You go create penicillin because you go out to create something else, and then penicillin just happens because of it.
It's a result.
Right.
Of a greater cause. Yeah.
Right. And maybe if I stuck around for 8 summers, I would have gotten that out of the Bookfield. What I got is work harder, you'll never create penicillin. And that's not what people told me. It was just my experience of it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And or your penicillin's still on its way.
My penicillin is still on its way.
That's right. Man, this has been good. Okay, now here's the deal. I need to tell you this. So we'll go into some rapid fire questions and ponytails, but we still got stories on this notebook. So here's what's going to happen. We're going to get either Nash on here, and we'll have you guys back together.
Oh, dude.
So either we'll get him first alone, and then we'll get an episode with both of y'all. Because sometimes when this happens, we have a lot more stories to tell. But it's like we bring them back for like a special episode where we're like, hey, we're gonna do a 4th of July or Christmas special where we're just gonna talk about like book stuff. It's more a little different kind of. I need to get you back in here, but we still have some fun stories and the rapid fire questions. Otherwise, we're gonna be here for 7 hours, man.
Absolutely. What I tell you, man? I get a chance to talk to an adult. I coach kids. Andres, my function here in Southwestern is to raise the price of our stockholders' shares by coaching kids every day. So I coach kids, and then I go home to my kids, and then I talk to my wife. And you're a real live human who's an adult, and you're on the other side.
I say cuss words sometimes. It's refreshing. You haven't heard a good fuck in a long time.
All right.
Clip
Take
that,
it
Amy.
away.
Sorry, clip that, Amy. Clip. All right. What was your favorite territory? So I guess where did you sell? I didn't even ask that.
So I sold in. Well, I blew through 150,000 person town in Brighton, Michigan in 3 weeks.
Nice.
So I sold in Michigan, and
real tight.
And yes, it was super tight. And then I sold in St. Louis.
For people listening who are uninitiated to this cult, so basically, it is estimated, or rule of thumb, I guess that's also not a good word to say. Sorry, I might get canceled for that.
It's good.
I'm
It's all good.
2022, but woke. I think 2023, we
Woke.
can't say that rule of thumb anymore because it was something.
Really?
Yeah, I think that's a new thing.
Oh,
I'm
oh,
in Portland,
okay.
so I'm kind of getting it. I'm first wave
I love it.
of progressivism, but
I'm gonna ask my heroin addicts on the side of the street out
yeah,
here because they
yeah,
might
be
know
like, hey,
too.
what is this supposed to mean?
Yep.
Anyway, the general ballpark estimation is that if you have 1,000 people in a town, it takes you, if you're working it tight, about 1 week to work. So
Yep.
for the context of when you're saying you blew through 150,000 person town in 3 weeks,
Yes.
that's why that's funny. All
Yeah.
right, you're welcome.
So my favorite territory, however, is that same first summer. It was a town of about 1,000, maybe even 800, and I worked it for three weeks. And it was called Fowlerville, and I sold so many books. I sold an obscene amount of books.
You gotta love it. You gotta
Yep.
love it. Okay, so
Yep.
follow up to that, which is the second rapid fire question, is what's your
Yep.
favorite kind of turf?
My favorite kind of turf is trailer parks. Number one. Uh,
Yeah, late
Absolutely.
knockers, late and
Yes.
early
Yes.
knocking.
1
Save
million.
your life.
1,000,000%. That's my favorite turf. Absolutely. However, my favorite, like, what do I enjoy actually spending my day around is not so much big brick, but old money in like St. Louis was really fun, Webster Groves, because they're old big houses that are in the city limits, and it's beautiful. It smells good. You know, everybody has money. They probably have like 5 kids sitting in there. But my favorite people were definitely trailer parks.
You gotta love it. Yeah,
Yeah.
I always like that middle low income country where you
Yeah.
see a double wide and you're like, oh, they got money. This is
Yeah. They
good.
got it. They
That was
got it.
that's good stuff.
They got it.
Favorite. I saw this was one of the questions that or stories that
Sure.
you had on here, but this is one of our rapid fire questions, which is why I waited. What's your favorite advanced sales tape? I know you have a little bit of a story about like CDs.
So my favorite advanced sales tape. Well, so here's my quick story about CDs. We had all CDs in my car my second summer. We would listen to all Southwestern CDs, and then we would listen to a mixtape CD
Yes.
that Cami, now Ellingson, made for us. And so my favorite sales CD is whichever one. It's I think it's Mark Rao or Bill Zizzy. I don't actually remember. It's the guy where he's like I sat down. He's like, I sat down with all of them. Sat down with all the moms, and I just closed them all. He's like, I closed them all. And then the second part, I think, was the same guy who's like, I told my friend he would never hit the units that we would hit if he kept having his demos over 20 minutes. And I was always like, man, I want to be that good. And he's like, so for 3 weeks, he sold nothing. And then, of course, on the fourth week, he sold triple what we sold. And so that was like, that was me just being like, hey, make yourself a machine, buy into the framework
Yeah.
of selling books.
Drink
and
the Kool-Aid.
drink the Kool-Aid, and eventually it'll pull off. But the best advanced sales CD was that mixtape, because every night we shut our brain off, and it was a perfect mix of, there was like Dumb and Dumber. Hey guys, big gulps, huh? Well, see you later. And I was like, I could crush the world. Yeah.
That's what you want, bro.
Yeah.
One of the guys in my brother's org, my brother's a DSM now,
Yep.
and they created mixtapes for the whole org. So the whole
Yep.
org had, and it was like pump up music. It's good stuff. I appreciate that.
Ryan Bennett, who's a gigantic CFO and has grown numerous companies, I followed him. He walked away from every sale. He didn't run. He walked away and he listened to like chill Bon Iver music. And I was like, what the heck is happening? You can do this and be incredibly successful. This is like meeting the Wizard of Oz.
Oh, that's good. This guy's a wizard.
Yeah.
All right. Favorite HQ.
Oh, geez. The Moaning Woman. Come on.
Oh yeah. Yeah. You can't beat that. The vacuum cleaner.
The vacuum cleaner.
All right.
Yep.
Favorite off schedule story, but you
Man, I never ever got off schedule. Probably my favorite off schedule story was is that we had to go we had to get licenses, and I went and called my sales manager in the middle of the day, and I'm like, hey, we're getting licenses. And he goes, where are you calling me from? I was like, the courthouse, we're getting licenses. He's like, your first years are seeing you step away from the conversation and go solve it on a telephone. go back in with them and just solve that. And I was like, okay, fine. He was like, I've got nothing for you. Go fix this.
Go knock
Because,
on the door.
because it was probably week 6 and he was trying to sell.
Good man, that's good leadership. You got some good leaders in your life,
This
man.
is great leaders.
Favorite breakfast spot?
Well, it provided me a lot of massive anxiety, but also Big Boy was my favorite breakfast spot in Michigan, because we just had a great group of guys who were just fun, and they also sold some books, and it was Big Boy. So every time I see a Big Boy in Michigan,
Is that
I
like a
definitely try
chain?
to stuff. Yeah. It's
Oh, I
like
see.
a
Like a Michigan
Perkins.
thing. I
Yeah,
see.
it's like a
Perkins. I
Denny's.
know
Yeah,
Perkins.
that
Oh
sort of
yeah.
stuff.
Oh,
Yeah.
in Nebraska we had Runzas.
Oh, really? That
That's
sounds
kind
like something that you do if you have diarrhea.
well, Brandon Q, another bookman who's also a stand-up comedian, he had a joke that said you can't spell Runza without the runs. I love that. All right. Best sales day. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean in units. It could just be like your favorite. Like you're like, man, that day it could have been a 0 day, but you like
Yeah.
found Jesus
So
or something. I don't know.
so we can talk about this with Stanton, because I had 2 0 days my second summer. My last 2 weeks is because the pressure was overwhelming. My best sales day was, I don't remember which summer, it was my first or second summer. I think it was probably my second, because I only sold for 10 weeks my second summer. And I had given up. I was like, I had already hit what I had hit last week. I knew I wasn't going to hit growth because I wasn't the last 2 weeks there. And I had just given up. I was like, I don't care. I'm going to the Boundary Waters canoe area tomorrow where there's no motors. I'm going to canoe with my family and have fun. And I just gave up. And I would like to say, and then I sold 1,000 units, but I think it was probably 250, 212 units or something like that. And I'll never forget that the last house of the night, I was kind of like, see, I'm still knocking. It's 10 o'clock. And the lady just bought a bunch of books. And I was like, I'm going home.
That's a good.
And it
And
was a
then
great
good one.
lesson. It was a great lesson because still in all my sales careers and all my acting careers, I need to just let go a little bit more. You know,
Ooh.
I need to give up a little bit more in order for the results, in order for the exponential results to happen.
Do you think that's a cool card issue, or is it different? Is it more like?
No, I don't have a cool
I
card.
was like,
Come
well,
and hang out with me.
here's the deal.
Yeah.
I haven't. You don't seem like you have a cool card at all. So I'm like wondering where that was, because earlier
No,
you touched on the same idea. It was the cool card. So what do you think it is for you?
It was the if there's, I was always a good student academically, so if there's an algorithm, I'll figure out how to solve it, right? But eventually in life, not just on the book field, there becomes a time where there's no algorithm anymore. That we have 8 billion humans on this planet together, and everyone's living a different, hashtag, and you can't solve it. Like you can't solve it, and that's exactly where it goes to. That I can solve it to a certain point. But acting wise, you got to give it up. Sometimes some things you get, some things you don't. Sometimes you think you're going to star with Rachel Weisz in a play, and you're this close and you don't get it, and then you also have to believe that the other side can be true. That you think, oh, I'm never going to get it, but you do get it, and that's what happened with my second Broadway show with Tom Hanks. So
that's wild.
Yep.
Life isn't happening to you; it's happening for you.
There we go. Welcome to personal development.
All right. Okay. And then, well, I have one last one. What's the most famous person you met selling books?
I knocked on the mayor of St. Louis's door.
That's sick.
Yeah. I don't have a Ric Flair story, but I did knock, and he had 2 high schoolers behind him. He had 2 high schoolers behind him. And he's like, I love what you're doing. I love what you're doing. I'll put my name on the thing. I was like, great. Do you have a place to sit down? He's like, absolutely not.
Wow.
But he's like, tell everyone that I'm a fan. I was like, okay.
Well, that's
and
good.
then of course,
hate him.
Well, yeah. And then of course they're like, oh, did he buy books for his kids? I was like, oh, no.
Not quite.
Not quite.
But he loves what I'm doing.
He supports me.
All right. We'll love that.
Yeah.
That concludes the rapid fire section of our programming. So now it's time for the ponytails. This is usually when our guest tells their most memorable story or their most memorable thought or closing thoughts on their experience of selling books and what it's meant for them, good or bad, in the span of their life. So that's just for people who haven't listened to an episode, it's like, I thought this was
Sure.
ponytails. It's been the ponytails, but
Great.
that's what, So take it away, sir. The mic is yours. This is
Yep.
Andrew Hovelson. God dang it. I almost
Okay, you were so
Hovelson.
good 17 hours
Hovelson.
ago when we started this.
I'm not used to saying it, but
yeah, I'll start with the Tim Ritzer. When I moved on, I didn't know that was an anomaly in Southwestern, and I looked back at that as, man, that's the coolest leadership. And then I heard the podcast about when the guy came into Bob Iger, and I was like, oh my gosh, I had that experience when I was 19 with Tim Ritzer. So that's my ponytails. The craziest story was there was a tornado there was almost a hurricane in St. Louis, and everyone's got a weather story, right? But I really, truly, truly believed that you should never, ever, 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 ever stop knocking. Okay. So there was like a monsoon, and I was like, whatever, I got like 6 weeks left. I'm not going to stop. And so there was probably about not even a quarter mile, I would say 30-yard section of St. Louis, all old brick houses. And I'm knocking on the doors, and they're opening, and they're like, no, because I'm soaking wet. Everybody's got a story like this, but I'm like dripping wet. And I've got a sample case that is dripping wet. Not even I mean, it's soaked. I have to get a new one when I go back home. And then I look at the next house. I'm like, just run across the street. So I run across the street. And at about the 5th house, this lady just says, young man. She didn't sound like this, with a deep bass voice. She says, young man, come in here. I was like, I can't. Do you want to buy books? She's like, no. She's like, do you have a phone? And interestingly enough, I might have had a phone my second summer, but I never had a phone my first summer. It was amazing. And I encourage anyone who's going to do an intense experience to not have a phone. And I probably didn't have it maybe it was in my car. She's like, there is a hurricane, like a tornado, a quarter mile away. It's coming for us. I was like, okay, do you want to buy books? And she's like, can you please come in here? And she sat me down, and she's like, let me just tell you something. I appreciate what you're doing, but you're going to die. And so can you just stay? Can you just
look up?
Can you just look up and like come into the basement with us? And I was like, I'm really wet. And there's houses knocking, and she's like, just come with me. And that's when I learned that you can have a little too. Anyways, that's my crazy book selling story. I have others where moms tried to pick me up and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
those happen. But that was like, we were in the eye. We were in the eye. And she was like, just come downstairs. I see what you're doing.
Can you imagine if you didn't something? Oh man, like she could have saved your life. You never know.
Thank goodness for that lady.
Young man, you have to come inside.
You have to come
You're going to die.
You're going to die. She said, you're going to die. I was like, I'm not. It's a great day to be alive. It's a great day to be a bookman. There's a tornado. And of course, we find out later that night that other people had to like rush back to their HQs because the tornado came through their turf, and there were houses down, there were trees down everywhere. People were hurt and injured, and I'm like, just it's behind that. The answer's behind the next house, Andrew. Just keep going.
There is no next door. The house is gone.
The house is gone.
That's the answer. Is hide. Go get shelter.
Yes.
Seek shelter. Yes.
Yep.
Man, I love that. The first of all, the Tim Ritzer story. That is super. It speaks a lot to who he is as a person and as a leader, because that was really cool.
It gives me goosebumps. It makes me choke up, or get on the verge of choking up, because I just didn't know. I thought that's kind of how that worked. I thought if you tell somebody your passion, and if you tell them what you want to do, and if you set expectations for them, just like they set expectations for you, right? And they said, okay, then when that conversation arrived, we would all shake hands and we would say, thanks for the great experience together.
Loved.
Yeah,
so cared for.
absolutely.
That someone's like, hey, because he's saying multiple things. He's saying, hey, thank you for being here. We will miss you. So you
Hmm.
feel like cared
Hmm.
for that way. I understand this is your dream. I know
Hmm.
what that means to you. So you got to go.
Hmm.
That's two ways.
Yeah.
And then on top of that is, I believe in you.
Yeah.
I have believed in you since the beginning. I've told you I have, and this is me showing you that I believe in what you're doing and who you can become. And that's a leader.
Yeah. It's the Goodwill Hunting Ben
It's
Affleck,
it's not your
Matt
fault.
Damon.
It's
It's
not
not
your
your
fault.
fault. Well, that of course, he goes, but it's when he said, you know what my dream is that I come to pick you up one day and you're not there.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful.
So, come on, I'm gonna cry again.
So good.
Yeah, absolutely.
So good.
Yep.
Oh man. Well, dude, this has been a blast. I need you to come back on with Nash.
Nash, it'll be great. Oh, dude, he'll be fired up. He'll be like, you got me on ponytails. I was like, yes,
Nash,
sir.
anytime. Come on. If you're a fan of the show, we're a fan of you. So thank you. Thank you
Cool.
for listening and being an avid listener. Hopefully, Andrew, you can also become an avid listener.
I will. I have become because I binge watch or I love podcasts, so I've listened to like 20 of them
Yeah.
in
Let us
between when we
know.
talk.
Let us
Yeah.
know which is your favorite. And okay, so on a serious note, like on a
Yep.
much we're not. I'm not good at self promotion, so it's
Okay.
hard for me to be like, hey, follow me. So
I'm
if
really
you
good
guys
at it.
okay,
I'm
if you
really
guys
good. I'm
like us,
shameless.
let me know. I'm good at other promotions. So if you guys want to get a little bit more information on how to support the nonprofit version
Hmm.
of changing the world for these kids, there is going to be a link in the show notes. We'll make sure we get that from Andrew before this episode's published.
Hmm.
And you can click on that, get information on how to support that way. If you guys want to ask Andrew some questions, you can either reach us or you can find him on social media at
Yeah, the best place is just pop into my DMs at Andrew Coaches on Instagram. I'm also on Facebook at Coach Andrew SWC, but pop in Andrew Coaches on Instagram to answer any
we'll have a
questions.
link to your Instagram below so that way
Yep.
they can just tap on that and go to your profile.
And then if by any chance you're just super inspired to actually see what coaching could be like for if you're an older alumni with your kids, go to Andrew Hovelson SWC.com. So that's my name, SWC.com, and you can book a parent consultation and we can see if coaching would
Oh
be a
yeah.
fit for your kids. That's possible as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So anything to do with the sort, maybe you were an aspiring actor and you want to
Mm-hmm.
maybe ask some questions about acting. I hope that's okay that I'm inviting people to do so.
Yeah.
Or if you sold with Andrew, maybe you sold with Andrew and you're like, holy cow, Andrew's on this show, and you want to say hi to him.
Yep.
Reach out to us and we can put you in touch. Or
Here's something crazy about acting, and I think I mentioned this, and I know you're trying to wrap it up, and this is also something that I'm not great at because I extend the time horizon of every interview
it's
or
all right,
every meeting we have.
dude.
Ad,
We're not even close to breaking the record for longest episode, so you're
Ad,
fine.
Adam Outland, who's our founder, is like, Andrew, just be quiet. The meeting's over. And I'm like, oh, yeah,
But what about this? This is a really
one
good
more
thought.
thing.
I'm the same way.
So here's a crazy statistic, guys, is that while the books might not be for everyone, coaching might not be for everyone, and Southwestern might not be for everyone. Some of the principles, if you can weed through if you can see the forest through the trees, there is right now 2 people at Juilliard, which is another one of the top acting programs in the country, who sold books door to door. And they're getting their acting like at Juilliard.
What? Yes.
I don't know. I don't even know who the Hans connected me with someone. And then she was like, it came up at like a cocktail hour. There's this other guy here too. I was like, geez.
Wow.
So that's kind of cool, huh?
Heck yeah.
Or maybe it's not cool. I don't know. Maybe it is cool. Maybe it's not cool, but it's facts. It's facts.
That's sick.
Yeah.
So maybe they need to be on here too. By the way, sorry, Chip Gaines, we didn't have time for you today, so we'll have to try to catch you on the next one. Have you seen that Jimmy Fallon or Jimmy Kimmel? He does that with Matt Damon. We're just gonna Matt Damon Chip Gaines onto the show. Sorry, Chip Gaines, we didn't have time for you today. We'll have to try to get you on the next episode.
You got to get Larry Wilmore on.
Dude, if you know how to get me Larry Wilmore, I have messaged him on Instagram. If you have or anybody listening who has connections anywhere, if you can get me Larry Wilmore on here, I would die. It'd be I do stand up. I do stand up comedy.
Okay.
So as a comedian, just alone on that, it'd be awesome.
Yeah.
So, and he's an incredible person to interview. So I've seen some of his interviews and stuff. So
So we'll drop the nonprofit in there. If you want a consultation right away, andrewhovelson.swc.com. And if you would like to just blow up my DMs, hit me on Instagram, Andrew
love
Coaches.
that. Well, and we'll put all those links below. So just scroll down. And we'll find it. All right, guys. Well, my name's Andres Gamboa. This has been the Ponytails Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Subscribe, like all the things. If you like what we're doing, send us a message. If you want to be on, we'll get you on there. The form that is on our website no longer works. We have to update that. So skip that unless maybe now it's updated by the time you hear this. So who knows? But still, message us and we'll get you on for sure. Thanks so much, everyone. We'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.